Mm-hmm.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the first meeting of the Finance Commission for 2024. We have a robust agenda this evening. I'd like to begin by welcoming our two new commissioners,
Ely.
and Stephanie Hernandez. You'll get to know them, I'm sure, as we go forward. Okay. Are there any comments on Zoom?
Let's do a roll call.
Oh, let's do that. See, I told you she did. Right.
Commission Chair
Here.
Giulioni, Vice Chair Rossi. Here. Commissioner Quaid. Commissioner Hernandez. Here. Commissioner Ho. Here. We have a quorum.
Fantastic. Or do we have any comments on Zoom?
We have one general public comment in person, no comments on Zoom so far.
Okay, let's start with our general comments.
Mr. Betta.
Good evening, council and new members. We stand in the city at a very important place with the deficit budget right now of $2.4 million, our new members. That's contrary to policy. It's the first time in 25 years this has happened, and it was led by Mayor John Primiff. It's very sad. We stand in violation today of four of the city council's policies. There was a promise that these things would be discussed. Promise was made in June. And for the 6 months remaining in Mr. Primiff's term, there was not one endeavor, not one conversation to discuss these issues. It is fast forwarded to you with this year, and this being the first component of budget preparation, to look at how you did last year. My greatest concern, shared by others, is the attitude that was demonstrated by the staff last year that went quickly from defensive to abusive. And to such a point that the city manager was forced or told to apologize to this commission, and she did not. She sent a lieutenant to read a statement that sounds like it was posted in the employee washroom. It's very sad. John Primiff did not apologize to Sheila Rossi for dismissing her while she approached that platform for an invitation from the city council that was extended to her. Mr. Primiff said, "I am the mayor." The behavioral things, attitudinal things, are the things that can change by volition. And they can change by an attitude from the staff that is very different. I have news for everybody. Sheila Rossi created several questions in 5 different areas last year. And the ACFR demonstrates the fact that she was accurate in bringing every question to you. She's been validated. The staff at your last meeting said that they had questions about purview for the commission, whether certain things you would do go to the city council.
30 seconds, Mr. Betta.
I call on that staff to address this matter with the commission. I call on this staff to declare whether it will produce a balanced budget. And I call on this staff to balance its calendar, which is currently in violation of the city council's budget policies. I call on the staff through the chair, sir, to make these statements.
Thank you, Mr. Betta. Appreciate it.
And Mr. Chair, we actually do have one more comment on Zoom.
Please.
Joanne Knuckles, 1 second. You should be able to speak now.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Thank you.
We have
Commissioner.
3 minutes.
Okay, thank you. Commissioners, I would like to speak to several financial issues pertaining to money that should or could be coming to the city related to the Caltrans houses. I will speak in order of importance. Number 1, when Caltrans purchases a house, it's taken off the tax rolls. Being a small city, we cannot afford the loss of our tax base, which is why the city sued and got an injunction in 1973 to stop any more houses from being bought. There is a provision in the state code to reimburse the city for loss of tax base, which we get each year. Former city manager Sergio Gonzalez, to ensure we were getting the amount we should be getting, did an audit in 2015. That audit determined that we were not getting what we should at that time. Caltrans owed us $1.8 million. We wrote a letter to Caltrans about the money due, or he did. If you do the math, that amount is up to $3 million now and probably more. Some of us think that amount should be even higher. We think there needs to be an updated audit and Caltrans should reimburse the city for those back payments. Number two, in 1999, our then state senator Adam Schiff initiated a rehabilitation account from the rent money for the upkeep of the historic houses in the 710 corridor owned by Caltrans. An audit of this account should be done as well to see how that money was spent or not properly. Could the city be getting some of that money for rehabilitation as well? Number three, from the sales going forward of the 63 properties owned by Caltrans in the city of South Pasadena, the money goes into a separate 710 rehabilitation account administered by the California Transportation Commission and Metro. There is no criteria as yet for disbursement of that money to the 5 cities that are entitled to those funds, as confirmed by a California Transportation Commission staff member today to me. Additionally, depending on how the money is spent by Caltrans, there would be no spillover from that account that would go to any of the 5 cities. This should be of grave concern. In closing, 50% of our general fund comes from property tax, so it's important that we ensure these funds in the future with knowledge of these existing accounts and making sure that we get what's due, as we must have as many of the Caltrans houses as possible put back on the tax rolls by being sold to individual buyers. If they are sold to nonprofit housing-related entities for rentals, there will be no property tax coming into the city for 55 years and beyond. So this is a grave concern of those of us that have been working on the 710 fight and trying to get our houses back now that we've killed the 710. So I hope you will consider these issues. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Nichols. Any other public comments?
No other public comment, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much. Let's begin with a budget calendar for fiscal year 2024, 2025. John?
Thank you, Finance Chair. It's good to see everyone after the year, the holidays. I hope everyone had good holidays and New Year's. So right now, I want to go over the budget calendar for the upcoming year. And I want to kind of walk through a couple things. So the budget calendar is really an internal document. We're just kind of doing it. It's more for informational purposes for the budget, for the commissions and the council on there. With that said, we will probably make a few changes based on some comments from the January 17th meeting as it relates to public outreach meetings. So we may add another public outreach meeting with that. But with respect to this, so the normal process is we get through year end and we're going to present year end tonight. That's always going to be followed by the mid-year. The mid-year leads up to the budget cycle. So that's the normal process with this. So in the budget calendar here, you're seeing the February 21st, because that's really the kickoff, because that's the mid-year. And we're basically telling you we will still recap what we did for fiscal year 23. And then as that segues into the 23-24 fiscal year, and then looking at things that we may adjust to both appropriations and revenue estimates. And based on those kind of changes, we'll go through it. And it's primarily the general fund because that's our operating fund. And so that's really the core of our discussions for the most part. However, there will be some other changes, well, there's potentially other changes for some of the other special revenue funds as well on there. What we're doing, and so the calendar is just really kind of outlining the steps that the finance department's doing within the organization in terms of processes that we're doing as we go about developing the budget. On there, from starting out, sending out forms to the departments for them to begin working on their budgets, to where we have draft documents that are vetted and then presented at budget workshops for additional changes based on community priorities on there. So this calendar is really just kind of spelling that out and that timeline as we see it right now. That's about it. I mean, I can go down the specifics, but they're fairly self-explanatory if anyone has any questions related to that.
Are there any questions of the commissioners? Council representative?
I have a question.
Oh.
So on the calendar you have for March 18th, revenues expenditure projections to finance. At what point will you be bringing that to the Finance Commission?
So I'm sorry, so the March 18th, no, so we will really, as we're developing the budget, once we're at a point where we've got our budget where we're satisfied with it, at that point is when we will start presenting it to both the commissions and the council.
No, I understand that. I'm actually specifically asking, at what point will you be presenting the revenue expenditure projections, the 5-year projections to?
Oh,
the
I'm sorry,
Finance
for the 5-year. I'm sorry, I
Correct.
misunderstood.
Commission? No problem.
So with respect to the 5-year, so what we're doing there is on the 7th, we're going to have NHA
The
do a
7th of what month?
February 7th,
Okay.
I'm sorry. We're going to have NHA do a presentation similar to what they did to the Finance Commission on there. And then on the 21st is where we're really going to have the 5-year discussion.
So they'll do the presentation on the 21st for the 5-year projection.
That is correct. Yeah,
So
and
how are they doing that before they give it to you in March? So, no, I understand, but March 18th, revenue expenditure projections to finance. So,
From the
okay,
budget.
so that's a different, completely different process. So those are projections that are coming from the departments
okay,
on there as opposed to NHA. So to kind of clarify the point, this calendar in of itself is internal to the city as opposed to NHA.
okay, and it's also separate from what the Finance Commission calendar is.
Correct.
Right,
Yes,
okay.
yes.
And then is
So,
there? go ahead.
to your point, there's no changes to the Finance Commission calendar, correct?
No, there is no
Perfect.
changes. There is no changes.
And then is there a point, so the council, I see that it says finance, the individual council meetings with city manager and department heads. At what point does it presented to the council for direction on finance, on the budget?
So in terms of that process, so first, as we're developing the budget, my number one goal is always to get the budget in balance, right? So that's my first priority. So as I'm getting information from the departments and I'm compiling it and I'm coming up with revenue estimates and so forth, once I roll that up and I compile that into a summary, in other words, here's our beginning fund balance, here's what the revenue is based on the information I'm getting from the departments and the expenditures. During that process, I go through several stages with it. The first is if the budget's out of whack, for example, if expenditures are exceeding the revenue estimates, the process normally is I throw it back to the departments, I make them rework their budgets. So that's the first facet of it. Once I've got it in sync, then I present it to the city manager who is working with the council and for feedback and different guidance. And there may be adjustments based on those conversations. And once the city manager is satisfied with that, at that point, then we present it to both the commission and the council at that point for public budget workshops.
But there's no point where it's a public meeting where the council is providing direction. So,
That's a good question. So there will be that. There always is. So the council direction will be during the budget workshop. So our goal, number one, is first to get everything in sync. And then from there, then it's really the council direction and then also, Finance Commission involvement with that too. in terms of their priorities. And usually I say, it's their priorities and how they want to spend the money.
But I guess I think it would make sense to have on the calendar, I see the individual council member meetings with city manager and department heads, where I assume
Yes.
council members are giving some of their individual priorities, but it seems to me that it should be a public meeting. And they should be giving direction and information on their priorities in public.
Right. So the normal process with the council members, they're just giving feedback. So in other words, they're talking about their concerns and what they would like to see. We go through a process with whether we can accommodate that or not for whatever the reasons are on there. And then at that point, we do present it in public. Does that, I don't know if that answers your question?
I just want to know, do you mind if I jump in?
Please. Great.
And I apologize because I had a illness in our family, so I missed the last council meeting. And I really appreciate this budget calendar. I get that it looks more internal because most of the dates on here don't really
Have any bearing outside?
correct. But I do think that what Commissioner Rossi is getting at, and my own feeling is,
Mhm.
I think there is a budget policy or a finance policy about
Mhm.
after the presentation of the mid-year budget report, in other words,
Mhm.
this current budget report,
Yeah.
that the council is to provide direction to the staff regarding the budget for the upcoming year. So in other words, we're learning from last year, and so then the
Yes.
council provides direction on the coming year. And I think that's what Commissioner Rossi is getting at. So when I look at the calendar, it strikes me that if we're getting the mid-year budget report on Feb 21,
Correct.
that maybe adding to that, council to provide direction on the budget, because it doesn't look to me like you're starting on the budget till Feb 26.
Sure.
Does that make sense?
No, absolutely. And I apologize for not really stating that. I hate to put it this way. It's kind of a given.
Yeah.
So I apologize for not really
Yeah, I think,
stating that.
John, it is a given, but I think given the history of kind of the finance situation in this city over the last, let's call it 3 or 4 years, probably 7 years, pick your number, that putting something, I think would make people feel a little bit more secure, not secure, but it just might be better if we were very clear about that.
Absolutely.
Okay, that would be great.
Thank you, John. Thank you, Janet, for bringing that up. Thank you, John, for being amenable to it. And thank you, Sheila, for pointing that out to us. So the amendment is going to be on February 21st. We will have the mid-year review and
Council direction on what their priorities are for the upcoming budget development cycle.
perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm sorry.
And the five.
And the 5-year projections.
Yes. Oh, yeah.
Well, the 5-year projections looks like they're coming. Oh, yes, you're right. You're right.
So
Yeah.
February 21st is going to be a long evening.
Yeah.
Okay, fair enough.
And one quick question, if you don't mind,
Please.
Chair. John, is it standard to have a meeting? I know last year that each council member was brought in and all the directors are present, and we have a meeting with everyone there to sort of just review the budget.
Right.
Is that pretty standard?
It's fairly standard. So in some smaller agencies, typically I'll develop the draft budget and then we'll just have a budget workshop where the council starts weighing in at that point, with what they would like to see in the budget or what they would like to be adjusted or whatever their priorities are. In other agencies, a lot of times, council members will do one-on-ones. They'll come in, they'll meet with the finance director, or they'll meet with the city manager. So for example, in the case of my wife at Santa Ana, a lot of times the mayor and the council, they'll come and meet with her one-on-one about what they're looking for in the budget. She takes that direction and facilitates it to the best that they can.
And
So it's not exactly uniform, but in general, that's how it's
But I have to ask, like, how, if they are giving direction in those individual meetings,
Yes.
how is that okay?
Well, so, an individual, council member can, make, requests or things like that, but it's the ultimate council that will vote on it and decide whether they want to incorporate it or not. So it isn't one person, say, I want,
Right, but I think from an open government standpoint, that
Sure.
it should be something that if individual council members are putting together requests, that it should be documented, that it's individual council members and the priorities versus kind of folded in and then brought to the council as a whole. Because I think, these documents are so large
yes.
and people start like, oh, okay.
And they are, as you
Mhm.
guys painfully saw last year.
Yeah.
So,
So from an open government perspective, I think best practices is to make sure at least it's on public record. If the councils, if you're doing individual meetings, then
Sure.
it needs to be, you know, this council member requested this to be included into it. So
so,
that it's not communicated, because it's not communicated as the council
yeah,
has directed or the council has requested,
sure.
that it's clear like where it's coming from.
Okay, so let me take note of this. Obviously I have to, consult with the city attorney and that whole process. But I don't see any problem with that.
Yeah, and
Uh,
John,
And Janet, would you please take back to the council this conversation, if you don't
Yep.
mind? Find out what their preferences are too.
yep.
Okay.
I just recalled last year thinking that it was a lot of time and a lot of staff time because all the directors are there. And then we heard it like 3 more times.
Yes, yes.
So I just kind of felt like, but I was new last year, so I was just kind of letting things occur. But it seems like, and maybe you can have some input because I know you were recently hired.
Yeah.
And maybe just kind of rethink what's the most efficient way to do this in a sort of transparent and open way. And anyway, that's just my
Sure.
thought.
And generally that's really the budget workshops, which are in public. It really is. For everyone to weigh in, the critiques on it or what they want to change or what they'd like to see. It's really the best way because it's more concise. Everyone is on the same page. It's transparent, let alone the most efficient way to do that.
If there are budget workshops, why is it necessary to have?
The budget workshops, in my opinion, are very necessary. You need to,
Yeah.
they're very necessary.
Suggesting get rid of one-on-one.
Yeah.
Budget Workshop, got everybody listening, hearing everything that's being said, so there's
Yeah,
no misunderstanding.
Right.
About what's being said. Right.
all I can tell you from my own personal experience, it's been past practice at most cities that I've worked at on there. But it's something that, for me, again, personally, I'm not opposed to. I see no issue with that whatsoever. And it, quite frankly, it makes my job easier having less meetings and where everyone's on the same page. It makes the process a lot smoother. But again, I have to, speak to city manager. I have to speak to city attorney, before I can really weigh in on that side of it. I don't want to misspeak.
But, and I think my specific question that I asked for the city attorney is documentation of any sort of recommendations that are incorporated into the budget. If a recommendation is being made by an individual council member, it needs to be, and you guys are planning on incorporating in that, then that needs to be recorded.
So the one thing I do want to add to this, a lot of times the one-on-ones are really just for familiarization, with the budget, the process, some of the information. As everyone has seen last year, there's a tremendous amount of information that's being provided, information overload. So it's not, a lot of times I want to be careful. I don't want to misspeak and say, people are asking for things, I don't want to give that impression. But I understand the point, the perception of it that could be. Usually it's just informational and where they're have the ability to ask more detailed questions rather than bogging down a meeting on there. So again, I want to be careful. I don't want to mischaracterize that. But at the same time, absolutely, I will definitely raise this for, if no other reason, transparency on there. Absolutely.
Thank you, John. And I think are there any other requests we have of John as he continues to flush this out and make this and put this into place? We only have 2 short weeks, right? Very good. Okay. Thank you, John. Any other comments, questions? Okay. Next item on our agenda is the committee papers. Monthly investment report for October.
So I'm going to introduce our new finance manager, Terry Kim. So he's learning through a fire hydrant right now on there, but he's definitely holding his own. And so Terry, why don't you come up and speak to the investment reports?
Gary, it didn't take you long to get in front of us, did it?
Well, happy to be back. It's my second meeting here.
That's
and
right, exactly.
It's not quite the same when you're watching from YouTube,
Yeah.
but when you're practicing in it, it's not the same, but happy to be back.
Good.
So good evening, Mr. Chair, members of Commission, Terry Kim, Finance Manager. Today, I would like to present the months of October and November investment reports. So as of October, our investment value was 61.77 million with a market value of 59.81 million. There's a 188,000 increase from September. Our returns remain at a higher end, similar to last month's, and the current federal fund rate is 5.5%. Just for new commissioners, we have two main investment types. One is LAIF, local agency investment funds with 3.67% interest rate. And we choose LAIF because of its safety and quick access to the funds. We could actually get that fund available to us within 24 hours. And we also have a variety of government corporate bonds and overseen by Morgan Stanley and Western Assets Management, with the bond returns ranging from 4.83% to 6.73%. There are not that many activities in October, just one U.S. Treasury bonds that was matured. Looking at the next 6 months, we expect to spend between 33 million and 43 million. And the difference largely comes in due to unspent funds for capital projects. Our current investment, excluding bank balances, totaling 73 million, well above our 6 months expenditures needs, in line with California legal requirements. In months of November, our investment increased slightly to $61 million and 61.86 million. The overall investment performance and expenditures remained steady, mirroring October's trend. During this period, we acquired a few corporate bonds and liquidated a portion of our money market fund. Additionally, we invested in one treasury bond, which replaced U.S. Treasury bond that has matured in previous months. Our total investment in November stands at $74 million, exceeding our 6 months expenditures forecast, whether we use the 34 million historical average or 43 million budget figure. And that concludes the report for those 2 months. Any questions?
Any questions, Commissioner?
I'd like to hear from the treasurer.
Oh, no, I don't have any questions.
No, I'd like to hear from you because isn't this from the treasurer? Or you
What
said
would
you-
you like to?
Well, just any thoughts that you have, or do you know?
I think in generally, we're okay. I think it's really, we've been waiting more so to hear kind of on the longer term projections and figuring out where our cash needs are and our 12, 18, 2-year cash flow to get a better certainty around that to make sure that we're lined up as far as liquidity, but otherwise, I don't really have any current concerns.
Is your microphone on? I didn't hear you.
Hello?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. I was saying that, I don't have any concerns on our portfolio right now. The thing is really, waiting on a better understanding of our, CIP needs and the cash flow needs on that side. So I would like to get that kind of coming in so we can make sure that our liquidity is properly matched. That's kind of the big thing on the horizon.
Any other questions? Comments? Terry, your first presentation and you're sitting down relatively unscathed. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Before we move on, Chair, I just need a motion from the commission for those two items.
Make a motion for the reports to be accepted and put into the record as provided. You just roll call, please.
I'm sorry, can you clarify that motion and second? Was that by you, Chair?
Yes. it
The
was.
motion? Who was the second by?
Uh,
Commissioner Quinn.
Commissioner Quaid? Okay, thank you. Chair Giulioni,
Yes.
Vice Chair Rossi,
Yes.
Commissioner Quaid,
Yes.
Commissioner Ho,
Yes.
Commissioner Hernandez.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, John, we have the PowerPoint presentation that you created for us, and we appreciate that. Thank you very much. Could we do one thing? Could we go through the PowerPoint presentation rather quickly, drawing attention to those items that you believe are germane and want to draw additional consideration to? But also, we'd like to spend additional time on the actual report itself, if that'd be possible.
Sure, absolutely. So what we're going to do in terms of the overall presentation is first, I'm going to have Terry Shea, the audit partner, discuss the audit, discuss the process, the report itself overall, almost like from a compliance standpoint. And then once he's done, then I'll segue into the PowerPoint and we'll go through it fairly quickly and then open it up for questions at that point.
Thank you very much. That'd be very helpful. Welcome back, Terry.
So can you?
Okay. While he's doing that, John, am I correct? Didn't we receive some sort of a recognition for having the report in and didn't we talk about this in December? We received some sort of recognition for the quality of the report?
So we have received the GFOA award for excellence in financial reporting for our prior year's financial statements,
Okay.
or ACFR, our annual comprehensive financial report. On there, we have just recently submitted an application for consideration of the award again for this financial document as well. A lot of times it could take up to 6 months for them to review all of the reports and to provide feedback and whether they're going to issue an award. And then they also issue, things that they always want you to improve, so they go through that process and say, but, here's these things we would like for you to kind of put more focus on or better attention to. So that is in place, but we will probably not see anything for several months, possibly even through June. It is not uncommon there.
Well, thank you for submitting it, first of all. And
Absolutely.
appreciate the correction. Terry, you ready? Stephanie? Okay.
Whoever sat here, somebody's been chewing this microphone. Not crazy. I mean, I'm sure they're not, but it's not funny. I was looking at Glenn like, oh, must have been a tough meeting.
I'm sorry.
Read that. I'm getting old.
Yes, me. That's a big one. Okay.
Yeah.
The shielding.
Sure.
Okay.
Sure.
Perfect. Oh, hey, Steph. Can we have someone attend remotely in our meetings? Can we have people attend remote, commissioner or then? That's what I thought. Okay. As severe as it gets.
You could attend remotely, but you have to tell them where you're attending from remote.
So is that something you can do or?
I'll have to look at my exact calendar itinerary on
Would you
that.
let us know?
Yeah, sure.
Thank you very much.
Sure.
Is it on?
There you go. Okay. Press it back. What's the top side button?
So we don't have this in our packet, right, Terry? Thank you very much.
Yeah, there's no numbers. It's just procedures. So, good evening, Commissioner and commissioners. Really appreciate the opportunity to be in person this time. And I'm currently red on or green. Okay, so I'm currently working over at the city of San Marino, so it was a very easy drive. So I got to stop and have dinner, so that was nice. So my name is Terry Shea. I was the audit partner. We had Brianna as also the audit partner, but she's currently going through cancer treatments. So I kind of stepped in and helped review the financial statements and review all the work papers with her. It's an honor to be here in front of you guys and appreciate the work you guys do for your city. And now that I'm going to retire, I'll probably volunteer at my city to go to work. So. But I don't think they would have me. Who knows? So, anyways, so we have an audit objective is to express an opinion on management's financial statements. After gathering evidence, evaluating sufficient appropriate audit evidence, we provide reasonable assurance that the financial statements are free of material misstatements. The opinion as to whether the financial statements are presented fairly and all, you can still read that one. That's good for 66. In all material respects in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles. So then next we get to audit standards followed. So we follow generally accepted auditing standards and we follow generally accepted government auditing standards. And that's referred to sometimes as the yellow book. You might hear that. So responsibilities. So management has the responsibilities for the financial statements, complete and accurate financial records, comprehensive framework of internal control, including controls to prevent and detect fraud. The governing body, they have a fiduciary responsibility and they ensure that management fulfills its obligations for internal control and financial reporting. Auditor's responsibilities, ours are to obtain reasonable We don't give absolute reasonable assurance. The financial statements are free of material misstatement. Examine on a test basis, evidence supporting the amounts in the disclosure. So the city provides us with work papers and schedules with numbers on them, and then we verify that those numbers are correct. We look at invoices, we look at payroll, we look at debt, we look at receivables, get backup for all the items on the schedules. We assess the accounting principles used. We come out in early May or June, and we look at all your procedures, your accounts payable, your cash receipts, your cash receipting, payroll, and then we do test of transactions to make sure that the controls are functioning properly. So if the controls are functioning properly, then we design our year-end test based on relying on those controls. Then we express an opinion on the city's financial statements. The final opinion over the financial statements is that they're fairly presented in all material respects, which is called we give an unmodified opinion. Estimates are reasonable. Significant accounting policies have been applied consistently between the years. And the big part of the financial statement, which makes them so long, is all the notes and the disclosures. We make sure there's a checklist put out by the GFOA and also our standard service that we use that probably 85 pages long with checklists, and we go down each item to make sure that your statements include all the appropriate disclosures. Any questions on the procedures or the process?
So by the disclosures, do you mean the notes
Yeah.
that are in?
Yeah.
I mean, so at our last meeting, we actually did a discussion on the insurance fund and noticed dramatic differences on how the notes on insurance fund
Sure.
worked. So I do curious to see what the standards are, because I saw back in, prior to 2014, discussions on insurance fund included premiums. Then it went for a while where it was discussing, I think OPEB or pension fund instead of the insurance fund. Completely not under you, but and now it just simply puts in a policy with no information whatsoever on the premiums that are paid or any sort of information.
Yeah,
that's
none of those are required. What's usually required is like a 3-year. If you have any cases that are significant that affect it, you could put a note in there and say this, like if the attorneys say that you may win, you may lose, we don't really have a dollar amount, then you don't report those. And then, but if they say, hey, this is possibility we may lose in a dollar amount, then you disclose those.
But nothing has ever been reported for the last 10 years.
We have,
So what's been reported in the last 10 years has been simply, if anything, just the insurance policy.
right, but there
and-
is a note in there that has the total liability.
Well,
Shows the
we-
beginning balance, the additions, the payments, and then the ending balance. That's what's required for the insurance. for
Right,
the
it's not in the notes, but
liability.
there's nothing in the notes on that, but
There should be.
we can have a later conversation
Okay.
on that. I was curious on that because from my understanding was that you didn't necessarily review the notes for accuracy and
We'll double check.
consistency. I don't see consistency.
Okay. Well, I can make a note of that and I can get you an answer if you want to have a later.
Yeah,
discussion.
no, absolutely. And we're going to go over the audit fairly, I think, in depth later. I just was curious on that.
Okay. Any other questions or comments on the procedures? We want to thank the staff. They worked hard to get this done and get it out and finished in December and to you guys in January. So, and it's the first time I've wore a suit really since COVID. So I had to go buy a new suit. They didn't fit. So.
Are you going to be around to answer questions?
Yeah, I'll be here all night.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Later, I say less traffic.
So now we're going to talk about the year-end results as opposed to the audit procedures in itself. So let's see here. Stephanie, a question I have for you, the PDF, so you do have that available? Okay, take that. Okay, so first, we're just going to talk about the year-end results overall. And so we'll go through the presentation and then, per the commission's request, and then we'll open it up for whatever questions that everyone has on there. So what I would first like to bring up is, so we're slowly making improvements, in the finance department as we've been rebuilding it. So several of the things we've been able to reduce several of the findings from the prior year. They had to do with the accounting and management of capital assets. So in the past, they've had to rely on others to prepare our capital asset schedules, our depreciation schedules. We've brought that back in-house now, and so that's one of the findings that's been dropped off. The other one is with respect to year-end closing procedures that really didn't exist before, and so I've incorporated those into this year, and they will get better and better over time. It's just it's a evolution, kind of a process there, but nonetheless, those two findings were removed, so we're making headway with that.
John, do you mean remove from the accountant's letter?
Yes,
So-
yes,
So their internal control letter.
correct.
Thank you.
So
Yes.
John, I'm going to stop you here for a second. And actually, one of the issues I have upon receiving this presentation is that we actually have a document that includes a staff report, a management report, and the audit. And the management report and analysis are part of the audit package that we were looking at tonight. And it's not, there are things that you're going to be presenting here that are not going to sync. So already just looking at, or there'll be questions that I feel like, do we ask the questions now or do we add it as we go through the document? So for instance, here you put not listed, but you didn't include what was listed, that there are 2 material weaknesses. It's
Yes.
also not, it's not spelled out in the staff report, which you talk about that these 2 findings were dropped, but you don't actually say specifically that there were 2 material weaknesses in the findings in the
Sure.
staff report. And that's something that absolutely must be in the staff report. It needs to be front and center. And I'm
Okay.
actually, even in this, doing this presentation now, it's great that you listed what's been dropped off. And that's
Yes.
congratulations to the team for making that. And also really congratulations for getting the ACFR in for the first time in,
Reasonable time.
no, I mean, for the first time in like 5 years. I don't know how many years.
Yeah.
Like and actually doing it on time. So I mean, first, sorry, like
No,
I'm going to be going
point
through
taken.
this stuff, huh?
No, point taken
Yeah.
on the findings.
But-
Absolutely.
But yeah, so, for me, a lot of the points that I'm going to be bringing up is actually on how things are discussed. And what's said, what's left out, what's not consistent. But in this case, the findings, it's great to say, yes, congratulations, you guys worked hard to get rid of 2 of the findings. But I'm curious why in this presentation, you're not saying we had 2 material findings and why that's
Sure,
not
sure.
up front and center. And it's not in the staff report either. It's
No,
written in
it is not in the staff report. So let me address that. So what I can do is incorporate that into the staff report that'll be presented to the city council on February 7th. So I can bring that up.
Right, but understand what we are reviewing and judging on tonight is what's been presented to us. And so,
Sure,
and one of the
sure.
things like I'd really like to see in this reporting, and a challenge I've seen for the entire year is I understand wanting to say the good news, but as
Sure,
a
sure.
finance department, you have to be willing to say the bad news too,
Absolutely.
right? And you just say it as matter of fact.
Yeah.
And what I always inconsistently see is attempts to change and kind of say things in a way to only present the positives
Okay,
instead of the totality and like, this is just what it is. And it is just what it is. It's not a blame. It's not a criticism. It's just, this is how things happen. And so
sure.
this, like, again, like in this case, the findings fiscal year 22 versus fiscal year 23, it's not acceptable. It is absolutely not acceptable to not include the findings from fiscal year 2023.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, absolutely. So point taken. Let me disclose right now what the findings were in there. So the two findings, one of them is a carryover finding. Okay. We do have the document, Stephanie just, and so we'll pull it up in here. Okay, okay. So the two findings were, one was a continuing from the prior year, and it had to do with bank reconciliations and the timeliness of those. The other one was a reporting to Emma, which is a site for when you have debt issues, you have to post your financials, make certain you're in compliance with covenants and so forth. With respect to the Emma finding, we had not issued the financial statements yet. And so normally they want those posted by 12/31 on the Emma website. They have not been done. I have reached out to them and explained to them that we will be posting them by the end of this month. They're okay with that, but nonetheless, that is a finding, period.
Right, and I would like to note on that, because I have it in front of me, the cause listed by the auditors is that due to delay financial reporting and issuance of the June 30th, 2020 financial statements, the city fell out of compliance with the requirements noted above.
Yes.
So it's not to like beat a dead horse, but the financial mismanagement that happened in the years prior to your coming is actually where this is coming from and is initiated from. I'm not sure why I wasn't caught in earlier ones, but it's, this is something that we're still dealing with, or you're still dealing with.
Legacy, yeah.
And it is a legacy issue,
Yeah.
but it is very clearly stated in the audit report that it was from issues coming out of June 30th, 2020.
Yes, and I don't disagree with you on this at all. Yes, yes. So basically we have to post to Emma our financial statements. And so we have those, so we now can post them with Emma to resolve. And I don't want to say it's resolving the issue because it's a timing issue, so we've already missed the 12/31, so it's a finding, but nonetheless, to be in compliance with our bond covenants, we do have to post them, period. Absolutely. And also, Commissioner Rossi, point taken about, just trying to paint a rosy picture in there. Very much point taken on that. Okay. So this slide here is basically showing just how the budget for 23 changed. So what we're doing here is we're just simply showing what the year-end results were from the prior year, the original 23 adopted budget, and the final budget in 23. And so what you'll see in here, so for example, a lot of this information is referenced in different places, as Commissioner Rossi pointed out. So in here, so on the third column here, where you see the adjusted budget, you will see that in the act for example, on page 67 within that document.
Can I ask a quick question? Would you mind? So when you say the adjusted budget,
Yes,
tell me how that differs from the adopted budget.
absolutely. So the adopted budget is the budget that's adopted before July 1st of every year. And then there are changes in appropriations, there's changes because of mid-year. There's those types of changes that normally occur during the course of the year. And so this is where the budget ended up at June 30 of 23.
Oh, okay. Gotcha. So this was the adopted budget that was adopted sometime in 2022, before
July 1st.
July 1st of 2022.
Yes.
And then this is where we ended up
Yes.
at
End of year.
June 30, 2023. Gotcha. Okay.
Correct.
So again, what's missing from this that's in the audit, and I'm trying to understand why it was presented this way. That's awesome,
Mhm.
that year-end 2022 adopted budget, adjusted budget, but the variance to the budget. And that's also on page 67.
Correct.
And so the variance to the budget shows an entirely different picture than what's presented here. So if somebody was to look at this page
Mhm.
on a standalone, they'd be like, oh, okay.
Yes.
By the adjusted budget, there was, $3.5 million surplus.
Right.
that's, not the case. And I guess I'm curious why we go to the effort to show this page without including the variance to the final budget.
So this is just the change. This is just to reflect the change in the budget. So it's not to address what you're referring to as budget to actuals. That's not the purpose of this particular slide.
And does this also include the appropriations that, not the appropriations, the amount that went over appropriations?
This report, it's just reflecting the budget in of itself. Okay. So the next slide is a continuation of this. And so what this is really reflecting is, again, the prior year actual results. And then this is kind of more of a performance metric of when we developed the budget, we were developing what we our forecast for how we thought we were going to end the year of 23. And so this in the second column there, for example, this is listed on page 22 of the 23-24 budget document here. And then the actuals there. And then what we are doing, something not quite to the budget, but to your point, Commissioner Rossi, is so then we're comparing the projections to the actuals and seeing how were our projections? How did we track? And we actually tracked fairly well. We tracked within basically 99% of our projections for the 23 year on there. So that's a really good thing on there. The next is, but I will follow up on your point about the budget and the variance that's listed on page 67. Once we're done with this, I'll happily go back to that. So here, this is just a summary comparison of our revenues of all fund types in here. And there's a couple things I want to point out in here that are really kind of important. So our original budget in the general fund, the 42.8 million, it included the state and local fiscal recovery fund revenues in there. They were in the estimates, they were removed from the general fund because we put them in their own fund. And so they're removed, and that's why you're seeing it going from 42 down to 36. That's the bulk of the change from there.
Actually, I need to go back to that last slide again.
Sure. Let me
because it
hang
is
on one
supposed
second.
to-
Okay.
So, again, I'm looking at the budgeted amounts on page 67.
Mm-hmm.
And for revenues, it was, there was 42,849,230. That's not what was projected here.
Hang on one second. let me
So
go
by
to this.
projections, what are you talking about the budgeted projections? Or
So when
whereas-
I'm talking about projections in the budget, so every year when we're developing a budget, we're always first and foremost forecasting what we're going to do in the current year that we are in. So when we were developing the 23-24 budget last year, we are forecasting what we're expecting the ending results to be for 23 so that we can project what we expect to end in 24.
Yes, but when you're preparing those results, you're
Yes.
preparing it in May of that time.
Well, we're not comparing, we're forecasting.
No, right, but when you're forecasting in May.
Yes.
Which I'd hope by that time you have a pretty accurate, view of what the projections are going to be. The bigger concern is, again, on page 67, how far off it was in the budget for 2022, 2023.
Sure.
So this, what you're saying is, come May, you had a pretty accurate idea of what your ending was going to be at the end of June.
Right.
That doesn't tell me that much. I mean, it's helpful because yes, I think you did a great job coming in, and you weren't responsible for the 2022-23 budget. Let's be very clear on that. They were very off. I mean,
Yes.
they were very, very off
Yeah,
on
I
their
know.
budget. So that's something I'll pin it for right now. But so this is actually how you did to projections done 2 months ahead. Okay, at the 10-month mark.
Yes.
All right,
Yes.
I won't-
That's a fairly accurate portrayal.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. So, I can't speak to the other. Um, okay, so, in our next slide here, what we're doing, and kind of to your point, Commissioner Rossi, that's why I'm so much focusing on the projections as opposed to the budget for 23. So just kind of, I'm going to be naturally biased for that because I could control that. The, Right.
And I appreciate that, but I do believe that everybody, and not just this room, but the city council needs to also have an understanding of how far off information was in 2022, 2023 prior to your coming in.
yes.
So that they really do have a clear understanding that we haven't been working with some real numbers for a while. Look, and it's actually just, it's a testament to the work and hard work that you've been doing this last year. So I just want to make that very clear. So my criticism is not of you. It's just saying that that's information, no rosy pictures.
So, and just so I have it clear, so we're talking about the last, right now, we're just talking about 2022, 23, the 23 fiscal year. So these would have been budgeted numbers approved in May of 2022
Correct.
for fiscal year 23.
That is correct.
So those particular, so in that time frame, early 2022, we weren't quite budgeting like we should have been, or like we would have hoped we would have been.
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
And John had to do quite a bit of work in his first few months for that budget to have anything close to being reasonable information. So that's why you saw a complete difference happening there.
And unfortunately, you guys suffered as I went through iteration after iteration after iteration until I got it to where it needed to be. So. I
Understood.
apologize
Thank you for that.
Okay, so, on this slide here, we're just simply reflecting, okay, so here's what the 23 budget, the revenue estimates, the year-to-date actuals, and then off to the right is what the prior year results are, in here. And one of the things that I wanted to kind of point out in here, and really, quite frankly, I'll say this was probably an error on my part in my projections on the special revenues. And it had to do with the SLURF monies. And so specifically, we're basing the projection because, budgets are, usually, money that you're receiving versus what you're going to spend. With respect to certain types of grants and the SLURF monies fall into that, you only can recognize, so we got all the $6 million in terms of cash, but we can only recognize the amount that we've expended against it. It's in accounting, they'll just call it the matching principle. So even though we received the $6 million of actual recognition of that $6 million, we've only recognized about $1,118,000. And that is because that is all we have spent against those monies. So the concern there, and I've just started initial conversations about this with city manager and public works is, so the SLURF money has a deadline. So we have to encumber it. We either have to spend it all or encumber it by the end of this calendar year, 24, in there. And so my concern is, as I was going through this and I realized, okay, well, we've only spent, a little over $1 million of the 6. We need to really kind of prioritize spending that money so that we don't have to give it back. So this is kind of a really big deal, in there. So there's a lot of different strategies. The budget, the money's been programmed out in terms of how they want to spend it. But a conversation really needs to be had, whether if we cannot meet those objectives of what those programs are, then we need to repurpose that money so that we can spend it by the end of the year, or encumber it by the end of the year, the calendar year.
So John, let me understand that because
Sure.
I certainly don't want to see $5 million going back.
Yeah. No?
I really, so so what you're saying that there's a plan in place to spend it?
Yes, so the council has put together a budget, an appropriation budget on spending that money. The concern that I have is, even though that's in existence right now, is if they don't spend the money timely. So specifically, one of the problems at the city right now is getting CIP projects done, right? And so there's a certain element of that's kind of related to that. And so I'm concerned that if they can't spend that money to consume it all, that we need to repurpose it.
So does it actually have to be spent? Because you've also said encumbered.
Encumbered.
Okay,
But what that means is we have to have contracts in place, obligations that exist, legal obligations
Okay.
that exist that substantiate that we have encumbered all of that money.
okay. And is it currently in towards streets? What do we, I mean, I don't know. There's a lot to that CIP plan.
Yes.
So which parts of that plan has the SLURF money been dedicated? You don't have to
I don't
answer that.
remember.
Okay.
I don't remember all the specifics. I can
Please.
come back to
I
you
think
with
what we
that.
probably need is a schedule of what the council appropriated for what purposes in the
Yeah.
first place. So what the SLURF funds were set to be expended on.
Right.
Yes.
To have an understanding of how quickly those contracts
Yeah.
can be put out.
Yeah, that's
So
going to be a
that's
priority.
that's my concern.
And I
Okay.
would recommend that you guys maybe get it on the agenda ASAP.
Maybe the February 7th agenda, we could add that. I think
To
that's
revisit that. Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah. And so this is something that just wasn't really on anybody's radar. It's always kind of in the back of my mind. I'm always looking for money. So it's like the last thing I want to do is lose anything like that. And so it's just a concern that I have, and I want to raise it now while we have another 11 months to figure that out. Simply put. Absolutely. So, here are the, here are the revenues. If there's any questions related to this, I'm happy to go into, any details, on there.
Hey, John, I do have a question, and I hope this is a easier one. Can you help me understand how we were off by 9 million, almost $10 million?
In the water fund?
Yes, sir.
Yes, and that's actually a very easy one. That the reason why there's such a difference is the prior year there was a $9 million settlement that the city received over, I believe it was contamination in one of the wells. And so we received $9 million that year. And so I don't want to say artificially, but it was an anomaly that it was so high in 22 for that reason. Whereas this year, it's just normal water utility billing operations, if you will.
And your predecessor didn't call that out as an abnormal transaction?
Yeah, in public financing, we would call that an extraordinary event.
It is extraordinary on many levels.
Yeah.
That it wasn't, we weren't made aware of it yet.
Yeah.
Okay,
So,
thank you,
I
John.
mean, what I noticed was in my analysis of prior years was that 2022, the predecessor basically bumped up numbers kind of arbitrarily. Bumped up,
Oh,
took
oh.
previous year numbers
Well,
and,
that's kind of a scary thought.
yes, no,
And-
it's pretty consistent.
And John, that money I thought was, the cash was actually received
It was.
like recently in this fiscal year, 23?
No, it actually was received in 22.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. The big numbers are always easy to spot. So here, in this schedule here is, we're just simply doing a comparison, the budgeted revenues to our estimated revenues, to our actual revenues. So one of the things in here, because when I was developing initially the budget for 2020, 23, 24, there was questions raised about the property taxes and, how could they go from 18.1, for example, I don't remember the exact number that I had budgeted. It was something like 19.7 in 23. So the question is, really, how is that really possible? And so one of the things I'm always going to tell you, it's not that I can't make a mistake. So my response is always, let me look. Maybe I did make a mistake. I don't want to just automatically say, no, no, no. And so when I went in there and I looked at this, one of the things that I noted was they really had materially understated a lot of revenues. And so as you can see in here for the property tax, I'm just going to use that as a poster child for this. So they budgeted, 18.1 million. When I was going through the development and doing the forecast, I was coming up with significantly higher numbers from there. And then, I work with, different consultants. In this case, it's HDL for like property tax and sales tax, and realizing, well, they're going to grow by another 5.4% in 23, 24. And so, but it's based on the actuals, which are based on the $18.7 million and not the $18.1 million in there. And so that was a little eye-opening in there. And so there were things like that where you'll see where the revenues were significantly higher. And one of the things in here, and I'll go to the next slide in here, is that really, and that's why I say I really kind of compare my estimate to the year-to-date actuals as opposed to the budget on there. The budget has the SLRF money, the 6 million, so you really need to kind of back that out of the 42 because it really shouldn't have been there in the first place. But we actually came in fairly stronger. And I'll say there's a caveat to this. So one of the caveats is in our ending results is that transfers in the section where you'll see transfers, you'll also see something other sources, and it's referred to as the SBITA, which is subscription-based IT agreements. And so what that did was it changed the accounting. So normally for those type of agreements, we're expending them as we incur payments and we're expending them, and that's how we used to handle it from an accounting standpoint. What this is, and it's referred to as Government Accounting Standards Pronouncement 96, is it's changing the way the accounting is being done, and it's almost treating it as rather a financing agreement, which therefore means we're putting an asset on the books. And so these payments now, the only part that's really an expenditure is the interest component of the financing. And so it arbitrarily, I don't want to say arbitrarily, but what it in effect did is it increased by 1.4 million, and I can point it out in the financials, but it increased it by 1.4 million from a reporting standpoint.
I'm having trouble understanding that.
Sure.
I went through and I pulled up the GASB rules on it, and I saw information on amortization and reporting amortization as an expense.
Correct.
So in this case, is this one time because it's for prior periods that it wasn't done correctly, but we're not going to be seeing this in future years? Like this is what I'm struggling because I looked and looked and I couldn't see where it was put in as a revenue line item.
It is not revenue. It is not revenue.
But this is in.
So it's a one-time, so that money, think of it this way, it's really one time. There may be much smaller, and when I say smaller, a few thousand rather than 1.4 million on an ongoing basis. So in other words, if we add more subscription, you know, over the course of years, they'll do that accounting and treatment of it. But this is really kind of a catch-up of going through all of these agreements and reclassifying them. And so that's why you're seeing the bulk of, that's why you're seeing this 1.4. You will
So,
not see that number again going forward.
so then, I mean, but this is in fund balance. So how does it impact the fund balance? Where is that cash coming from?
Sure,
Yes, I would love that.
sure.
Like John said, it is basically a financing agreement. So what happens is we take the value of the debt
Mhm.
and then an expense. So we did a exact same journal entry. We debited expense and we credited proceeds from other sources. So there's a net effect on the fund statements. And then when you do the GASB 34 conversion, you take the revenue off and you move it up to a liability. You take the expense out that we added and you move it up to an asset.
Right.
And then you amortize that. And those only in the first year you'll see that. After that, you'll just see the amortization and then the reduction of the debt. Now the payments are already made when the city makes their subscription, like their software payments. So the only difference is we do a little bit of tweak to that and move some of that to interest. But it had a net effect to the fund statements because we record a revenue and a liability, or a revenue and an expense. And then on the GASB 34 conversion, the revenue comes off, goes up to the liability, which you'll see subscription liability. And if you look at the capital assets, you'll see a subscription asset. And so it had a zero effect to the fund balance. So
I guess I'm just trying to understand, because in this, on page 67,
you just don't see the expense is all you don't see because it's buried in.
so
the
it's
expense.
buried somewhere else in
Yeah.
the expenditures. Okay. Does that make sense, Houston?
It's quite possibly the
No.
worst Gatsby I've ever seen. And
No, I've tried really hard
What-
to understand. I'm like,
it
I
was
don't
one
understand
of the
this.
reasons why I considered retiring too. So
Was that
Is
a,
this
was,
why you're retiring?
so it's a GASB, not a FASB, right? So was this a required GASB? Was it, did it just go into effect this year?
yeah, what happens is you have several software programs the city buys. Some are 5 years, some are 10 years. And so if it has like a 30-day or 60-day cancellation side on both, then you don't accrue it. Like the city software, they're not going to get rid of that. So Gatsby's just making the readers recognize that there is this liability out there for this software for 5 years that not necessarily was disclosed. Now they're making you, and there's a note in there that says, here's what we leased, or here's the software we have, and here's the payment. So it's just a way to recognize there's this 5-year, 10-year liability for this software.
So not all of our software is in here, but a substantial majority, would you
yeah.
say?
Because if you looked at it, like every client I went to this year, they had a list of 50, 60 softwares because you don't even know what the IT department has, right? All the stuff they're running.
Right.
And then you just list by list. And a lot of people there's companies out there that specialize in it. They were a lot smarter than I were. They jumped on it, developed their software. And so it's only like 10 grand and it's worth hiring them.
I mean, there has been a substantial investment in software, I've
Yes.
noted, over the last year or so.
Yeah.
But did you also tell me that you've restated some of the prior years?
On these, we did not restate. prior
Okay.
year. We just picked it up and went current. So. Yes, you just can't see it. It's buried in all the other expenses. So, and then on the first 2 pages, which is the full accrual, it gets eliminated. The revenue and the expense get eliminated. They move up to the balance sheet. So,
I mean, so the challenge is, I mean, it's obviously something you have to do. I get it.
put
Um,
30-day cancellation in all your software.
Is when you're looking at the net position or the fund balance, I guess, for 2023, it actually would have been lower than that because we would have had it not been for that one-time change.
It had zero effect on fund balance because
That's
we
what-
debited an expense and credited a revenue for the exact same amount. You just see the revenue because it's down there below and other financing sources, but the expense is up in top, up in that capital outlay or whatever department had those software. So like if it was general government, like city clerk software or the finance. So I actually helped prepare the journal entry. So it had a zero effect on your fund balance.
Okay, so look, I'm looking at page 67. And
Me
page
too.
67, you have excess of revenues over expenditures for actual amounts, negative 1.28. Then you have transfers out for 1.292.
You see that 1,424,000?
I do. But my point is, had it not been for that,
Well, we made the exact same entry up above in those expenditures, so it had a zero effect on fund balance. Yes,
okay, because it's up in the expenditures.
yes.
Okay,
I actually prepared that journal.
okay,
Yeah, zero effect. So
okay. It just,
Yeah.
just the way it's laid out, it doesn't look like that.
Well,
And anything, I mean, that's as a criticism.
unfortunately, we're limited to showing the revenue below. And possibly in the future, if this happens, you could actually maybe separate it out on the top part and show the same amounts. But right now, I'm not sure that you could get the award if you separated it out.
Or is there a note on this?
No.
Yeah, there's a note.
But it doesn't have a note that explains this. It doesn't have a note that explains that the revenue and expenditures clear it out, that it's in
Right.
there. So
Well, there's required disclosures. That's what there's there. And we don't have like a note on every like
Okay.
accounting treatment, every debit or credit.
Got
So
it.
it'd be like way too many pages. So
We can expect this next year too.
No,
only if you have new software. So what'll happen next year is you have this liability and they show the amortization 5 years, 10 years or whatever. And then you show the asset, and then down below there's amortization. So what you currently have, unless you get rid of the software and buy new software, that's when you would see. So
More than what you wanted to know on GASB 96. Okay, let's see here. So where are we? Let's see, sorry. Okay, so so this is just simply the breakdown, the original the budgets, the budgeted revenues, the estimates, the year-to-date actuals, and then a comparison over the prior year on there. And again, what started the GASB 96 thing was the increase in revenue, and so I wanted to point out that that was kind of a contributing type of thing related to that. Okay, so here, this again is, we're just doing a comparison to actuals, the budget, the estimates, the year-to-date actuals. And what we're doing in here, and it's because this graph was the size of this graph. One of the things I just simply want to point out in here is, so the overall, the revenues came in about 3.8.4% higher than what our projections were. The other thing in here is related to the, let's see here. So on the property taxes, this is just kind of a rehash. I really don't want to go into that again, but I do want to, let's see here, go over to, where is it? Why am I not seeing it? There is. Okay, so this is still the revenues here. And okay, here we go, is really on the expenditure side of things. I'm going to come back to this slide. So here for the general fund, the expenditures, so the budget, the original budget was 38, or I should say the budget was 38.9 974. Our actuals were 39.1. Compared to our prior year, they were just over or just under $4.9 million higher. And you can see in there, it's really, the growth is really in maintenance and operations. And I'm kind of following along with the way the budget was originally structured. I think what I would like to do going forward is really kind of break that down further, because it's just such a large group. So I know in the past, for example, there's been interest, legal costs and other types of costs. So I want to break it out further going forward on there, but I just want to be consistent with how it was being presented with the budget in the past. So for no other reason, just being consistent with that. But it's really the largest component of this was in maintenance and operations on there. Capital outlay, not that large,
No,
capital
no,
projects.
Wait, let's go back on capital outlay because
Sure.
this is not matching the numbers that I'm seeing again on page 67. So it
Let's see
looks
here.
like in the budget, capital outlay for the general fund was 1.34 million. And then it looks like we spent 156,909, not 159, but 156,909. And so the variance to that was actually significant. So it was, $1,000,000.067 was the variance on that.
So on the capital outlay, on 67, so the actual amount was 156,909. And
Or the budget, I guess the final budget was 1.2245. So it's 1,224,500.
I'm sorry, where are you looking at? I'm sorry.
I'm looking page 67.
Yeah,
Capital outlay. I'm looking at original budget,
yes,
final budget,
yes.
actual.
Right.
So the original budget, so FY 2023, I guess it's probably adjusted, but would be, so if this is, I can't tell if this is final budget or original, but it would, if it's the final budget, it's 1,224,500.
Yeah, so,
159,906.
right, yeah, and that's what I just kind of noticed in there as well. You know what, I'd have to kind of dig into this and see, off the top of my head,
Well, my assumption is these are the audited financials.
these are,
So
they
page,
they
six-
are,
so
yeah.
page 67 is what I would go to.
Right, right. So let me look into that. Off the top of my head, I can't answer it. But I will look into it and I will follow up.
Oh, John,
Yes,
maybe the sum of capital outlay plus capital project.
No,
No?
no.
well, let's see here. Well, rather than me speculate, let me get you the actual answer and follow up with you on that.
Let's say that except for that. Because I thought the same thing.
That must be a typo. That must be a typo. I think.
No, I thought the same thing.
Yeah, sure. Okay. So I will follow up, Commissioner Rossi, I will follow up with an explanation on that.
No problem.
And can I just quickly go back real quick? Because you also were going to break out in more detail operations and maintenance because
Correct.
that's a significant increase.
It is a very significant increase in there. So what I can do, if you want, I can break that down further into much smaller segments to
Something that makes sense without too much detail.
Mhm.
I mean, wow, 5 million over 8 million. I mean, that's big.
Yes, yep,
I mean, I would like to say though, however, that a lot of budgetary things were balanced by deferring maintenance.
mhm,
And I'm curious, like, this isn't actually necessarily a part of the audit, but one of the breakdowns to look at, I think, for the council and the finance commission in the future is, I mean, there's a lot of things that were deferred and that should have been being spent, and then the cost to catch up on that from an operations and maintenance standpoint. And even like in this audit, what I'm noticing is that there was a lot of capital expenditures that were deferred, so the budget looks balanced to some degree, but that's because of savings on not having spent the money that we're supposed to be programmed to be spent. So it's a big increase, but the question is, was it appropriate? That's a larger conversation.
Yep.
So just kind of looking at this right now at the surface, probably what has happened is some of these costs are being reflected in the operations and maintenance versus capital. And the only reason I say is because the total numbers tie out to the financials. So I'm just kind of wondering
Okay.
if that, I'm just speculating right now, but I will dive into it and get you an answer to that. Absolutely. So I apologize for that. Okay. So the next slide here is really just the breakdown of the general fund from a departmental basis in here. And so you'll just see in there, from city council, city manager, management services, city clerk, human resources, legal services, IT. So you'll see IT kind of grew quite a bit. And then of course, finance. Also within finance, you'll see in the non-departmental area. And one of the things there was that the city contributed $1 million, I want to say it's like $1,141,000 to our OPEB trust. And so that is a part of where you see that 12,989,000. And that's one of the reasons why it's so much higher than it was in the prior year on there. And then, of course, public safety, police and fire on there, and then public works as well. And then community development, we had let's see here. So the other area I wanted to kind of point out here is, let's see if it makes sure I'm not being dyslexic, is so in community development, if the Finance Commission recalls from the mid-year, we did close to $500,000 increase in appropriation, and it was due to a ton of prior invoices that were never recorded. And so that's one of the drivers of this number being significantly higher than what it was in the prior year. On there, library, then community services, on there, recreation, and then again, the capital projects within just the general fund there, within the departmental expenditures.
But you're saying that community development was higher because of a bunch of.
So,
Because-
yeah, so.
Because I'm looking at the budgeted number for community development was higher.
Mhm.
So they were expecting that, which is a little bit different than saying they found a lot of
Well-
invoices and things last year. And
Sure.
then it looks like the budgeted number for next year, or the budgeted number for 2023, 2024 increased as well. So it didn't look like it's kicking back to a lower number because it was unexpected receipts.
So two parts to that. So during mid-year, we did increase the appropriations for community development because we were finding a ton of invoices.
Okay. That's mid-year.
I think it was Interwest and there was another vendor, and there was a tremendous amount of invoices from prior years that started bubbling out. And so we went at mid-year, we said, we're estimating that we're going to probably spend $500,000 more than what we planned. And we did.
So are the budgeted numbers for 2023 based off of the mid-year appropriations?
It depends on what schedule you're looking at. If it's the original adopted schedule, no.
I'm looking at what's right in front of me. So I'm asking, are these numbers that you put in here based off of the original budget, or are they off of the, mid-year budget, the appropriations that happened?
So so when you're looking at the final budget, the second column there, that is what all the budgets, the appropriations were as of June 30th. So those do include mid-year adjustments in there.
So
Yes.
We're talking, budget, you said second column, that's actuals. That would be what
No,
that would
well,
be the ACFR.
I'm sorry, I'm looking on page 67. So the
So-
first
So no,
first
no, I'm
column.
looking at this page.
Look at
I'm looking at your
what you have up on
presentation.
the slide.
So I'm looking at what.
Oh,
you
I'm
have up on
sorry.
your
I'm sorry.
slide. And what it's saying is, so you said the community development was 3.6 because you'd made mid-year but adjustments.
Yes.
So when we were looking at the 2022, budgeted 2022, 2023 column,
Yeah,
which is four from the right,
right.
those are all based off of that's the adjusted budget.
That is correct.
So that means that in March, the budget was taken to 37 million for expenses, and we still came in $2 million. Nope, that's sorry. We still came in $2 million over budget.
Mhm.
Got it. Thank you.
Yes. Yes.
So the middle column, budgeted 2022-23, included all of the mid-year adjustments that we made in March of last
Yes.
year.
That is correct.
Okay. And
And I believe there are, and maybe it has to do with the OPEB, but because I do believe that there was a couple $1 million, there it is, on page 72. We had $2.6 million of expenditures that were over what was appropriated, which I'm
What page? I'm sorry, that you're.
page 72.
Page 70.
John?
Supplementary budget information, excess of expenditures over appropriations at the functional level were as follows.
John, is any of this that $1.6 million insurance bill we paid, like in June of 23?
No.
So
No?
the.
Okay. Okay.
No, that was done at the mid-year.
Oh, okay.
So that was appropriated at the mid-year, and this is 2.3 million is in public safety, is the over appropriated.
Is that the OPEB?
So you're looking on page 72 for the note 1 on general budget policy?
Note 2.
note 2.
Note 2. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, and your question relating to which, of the general government, public safety, or community services?
Excess of expenditures over appropriations at the functional level were,
Oh, for
and it
public safety.
shows, yes, and I mean, all of it really. I mean,
Yeah.
it was an excess of essentially $2.6 million when you combined those three line items.
Right.
So, a couple of questions there that I have, which is A, what happened? But B, why was an excess of appropriations?
So generally, appropriations are controlled at the fund level, on there. But I always hate bringing that statement up, because you really should be tracking to your budgets. However, with respect to this, what I'll have to do is I'll have to dive into, it depends on how they've grouped the activity. So I'd have to kind of do a deeper dive into this and see how they've compiled this, and then look at the accounts that are affected and seeing what has actually driven the overage,
So
which I'm happy to do.
thank you, John. I appreciate that. So in layman's language, talk to me like I'm an 8th grader. We had in March, we did an attempt to true up the budget
Correct.
for what you knew at that moment.
Yes.
Okay. In addition to what we approved in March, there was another $2 million,
Well,
2.6.
so the mid-year, so in terms of the process of the mid-year, the way it works is, we go through what do we expect to happen?
Mhm.
And so part of that is the department's giving me feedback on what they need and what they
Yes.
think they're going to spend. So for example, when I talked about community development, they're coming to me and saying, hey, we have all these invoices and we don't have any money to pay for this. So we incorporate that. That's the process that we do. Same thing with public safety on there. With that said, though, so we take that and that's our basis for whatever we determine for mid-year adjustments. In addition to that, I'm looking at the mid-year from a revenue perspective. Are revenues tracking? Are they declining? Are they going up? In that year, for example, the sales tax revenues were going to increase by, I want to say like 540 grand, whatever, in there. On the expenditure side, that is driven from the departments and what feedback they give me. I have no way to, to the veracity of it, if you will. I'm looking for support for them to substantiate things. Don't get me wrong. However, they're telling me, this is what we need. And so I'm incorporating that in. And then I'm also making determinations. Can we afford something? And for example, if things are going really bad, that's when the normal process, I go to the city manager and it's like, I don't think we should be doing this if we don't have to. Sometimes there's legal reasons that we're forced to do things. There's a lot of different dynamics that come into play with that, but that is the normal process. But I really need to dive into this because I do need to answer this so that there's no concerns about this. It's important.
Mid-year grew up February, correct?
That is correct. February 21st. Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you, John.
Thank you.
And again, I will reiterate what Councilmember Ross said. Commissioner Ross, pardon. I'll try to promote that.
Or demoted.
Nonetheless, I will dive into this and have an answer on there. Okay. Let's see here. So now this is just simply the is this the expenditures? Yeah. So this is really just the graphical breakdown of the expenditures here. And, as usual, police and fire are always going to take the lion's share of the general fund expenditures, followed by management services. Now, one thing with respect to management services, so they've taken on a lot of the divisions or programs that used to be in other departments. So for example, contract services is one of them. And grant management and some other things. And so they have a fairly large department outside of public safety in there. So there's no surprise that management services pops up as one of the top three departments for expenditures for the 23 fiscal year. Then the next one here is, and this is the one that always gives everyone heartburn, is really the changes in long-term debt, and particularly related to the pension liability. And so one of the things in here with the pensions and when they do the actuarial reports, there's a lag. So when they're preparing the 23 numbers, they're looking at 22 actuarial results. So there's always a 1-year lag with this. So in 22, the market did terrible. And so with pensions, it's a inverse relationship between, return on plan assets versus your underlying liability. So in 21, in 21, the market did gangbusters. It was like 21% return. And so, but that's reflected in 22 because of the 1-year lag. So when you see this, they made so much money, so the liability dropped. Now we're rolling into 23. Well, the 22 year-end results from PERS were disastrous. I think they had like a 6% loss. And so that's why this number has jumped so drastically. So this liability is mainly a function of market conditions. So South Pasadena is not unique. Every city is facing these same type of changes as a percentage. They may have larger dollar amounts, but as a percentage, they're all tracking very similarly to this because it's all PERS.
However, is there a way for forecasting purposes to do a smoothing of this so that we're not in this kind of situation where we're underestimating? I'm not, obviously the
Sure.
actuarials, but is there a methodology that can be used to kind of smooth this out so you're not seeing these dramatic changes?
What they
Planning.
do is they do a smoothing, and so for gains and losses, they basically amortize them over a certain number of years. And so, like for example, I could pull up like an actuarial report, and you'll see in there where you'll see, God, maybe 20 layers, and it's of each year where they're amortizing a piece of that year's gains or losses. And so it's an aggregate of that total in there. And then what they do is they're turning around and then they're charging the cities. And so when you hear us talk about our UAL, our unfunded accrued liability payment, that's exactly where it's being driven from. Terry, would you be one to speak a little bit more on this? Thanks. But in the actuarial reports, so like on the CalPERS website, there's the actuarial reports, and I don't know, it's like 20 or 30 pages into the document, but you will see an amortization of these gains and losses and how they end up with the current contribution that they're requiring of a particular city or entity to cover the unfunded actuarial liability. So it is doing it to some degree, the smoothing aspect of it.
John, if I remember correctly, we asked our actuary to come in and give us a presentation.
Yes,
in March, I believe. Am I
that is correct. Yes.
So,
Yeah. So this is, yeah. So that was, yeah, different actuaries.
oh,
Yeah. Two different actuaries. So with this, it's the CalPERS actuary. But I am attending the California Society of Municipal Finance Officers Conference next week. It's the largest in the country. And one of the things that I can do is make an appointment with our actuaries. And what I'll say is, let me see what kind of information I can glean from that.
Yeah, I think
The
Yeah.
PERS actuaries?
Yeah. Yeah, they came out before you were here.
Okay, yeah, because I was like,
No, was he? Yeah.
okay, I'm sorry, I'm not recalling it. Uh,
Yeah.
But,
Right.
if I'm able to get them out, I'm happy to do so.
So a question I had is, I mean, this is facing every city in California, but,
In special districts as well.
but what impact does this have on the city's ability to get financing for other projects? Do you have any
So-
idea?
So normally when it comes to financing, you're looking at your government, you're looking at your governmental funds as opposed to the government wide.
Okay.
So these reports here and what you're seeing here is government wide. And the reason why I'm kind of making that distinction, so a lot of times when you're doing financing, like say you want to do a bunch of roads or whatever, and you want to finance, say, $15 million. Well, a lot of times we'll go, for example, in that example, we will arrange to pledge, say, our gas tax
Mm.
or what are a few other gas tax funds as well, Measure R, Measure M, sometimes SB1 monies. And so basically what we do is we pledge those revenues for debt service.
Okay, so revenue bonds.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So, normally that's the mechanism, right now with interest rates so high.
Right.
But down the road, absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, let's see. Here are some of the CIP activity. And so this isn't coming back to the total figure, and I'm going to have Carrie speak to this. So I had him do analysis on this. This is only part of it. So we have capital outlay, and we also have capital projects in there. So this is really just the capital project activity that took place. So it's a subset of the overall number in there. But again, one of the concerns that I have for the city in general, and this is going to be a really big problem in my opinion, is getting these CIP projects done. Done. Yeah. So I'm not talking about the SLURF money now. So I'm kind of just in general, getting projects going, getting them done. Last year, we spent just a fraction of what our budget was for CIP in there, and we're just creating backlogs with this. We also there's other ramifications for this. So for example, some of the headwinds we're going to be facing, and I'm going to be talking about at mid-year, is we have the potential to lose SB1 money. And the reason for that is because we're not spending enough, what they refer to as maintenance of thank you, like blanked out, maintenance of effort, and to maintain receiving SB1 monies. And so right now, they're expecting the city to have a maintenance of effort from the general fund of $1.4 million to receive the SB1 monies. We haven't met that threshold. I don't think we've ever met that threshold. And so we were notified just recently that we are subject to clawback on there. So one of the things I'm reaching out to is a consulting group that kind of specializes in this. And what I want to do is I want to get that maintenance of effort dollar figure reduced. It's simply too high. In my opinion, it should be something like 600,000, 400,000. The cities can't afford 1.4 million
So
at the general fund.
So John, one I'm going to say first, this is exactly why it's really important to not just give the rosy news. So I really
Sure.
appreciate this, like giving this information and
Yeah.
putting it the way you did, because that's what needs to be heard from the commission and then the council.
Yes.
Because then the next question is, what is the bottleneck? What is the holdup of being able to? Because and one of the criticism I'm going to come back to when we hit the reports
Mhm.
is it looks, the net position is up. The net position is up
Yeah.
because of all of the money that was not spent for capital outlay.
Right.
Right. So,
right, yeah.
I mean, what you're looking at in the special revenue funds is you're looking at $7 million that was not spent,
Yes.
right?
Yep.
And so then when you say, oh, well, our city's net position went up to $7 million, like, because you didn't put the money to work that was budgeted.
Yeah.
So I guess the big question is, what's the bottleneck? Is it resources in public works? Is it like, what is it? Because that's where and this is where I'd say like the council needs to provide direction.
Yeah.
And it has to be done publicly, because I don't actually care about special projects. I care
Yeah.
about this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Is if there's something that they need to do before they start losing the money, that they need to do that.
Yeah.
They need to know that they need to do that.
Yeah. There's a lot of groundwork before you get to a shovel ready kind of a project.
Yeah, and I would follow up with that and say, we've heard some general things at council, but I don't think we're hearing it exactly like, I mean, somebody needs to start like flashing the red lights and saying, we're going to lose the SLURF funds, we're going to lose the SB1 funds, we're going to lose this. Then can be a real discussion about what do we need to do and how quickly can we, what's realistic? And because, we can talk about things for a long time, but we got to start taking action.
Well, also kind of a follow-up. The, we were talking briefly about financing. So if you issue bonds, they're tax exempt bonds, you have to complete the project basically within 3 years, or you will fall out of compliance with the covenants of the bond that make it tax exempt.
Mhm.
So that's another thing is like, okay, so you go do a financing and say, okay, well, great. We have, $20 million of bond proceeds for projects. Do you have the staff that can handle that to get the projects done, to
Right.
stay in compliance?
Right. So I know we hire a lot of consultants, and I know when you said I'm going to hire somebody to look at the 1.4 million, my only
Yeah.
question is let's make sure they don't charge more than 1.4 million.
Yeah, absolutely.
But it's kind of as I'm listening tonight, and I see the 5 million of SLURF funds. Now I see the 7 million. I mean, the capital that hasn't been spent. We've
Yes.
got whatever it is for SB1 funds. I mean, I guess my question is, and I know you've only been here less than a year. How does that, who keeps track of that? And how does that get communicated to the Finance Commission and to the City Council so that those two bodies can keep track of that and give direction based on the information presented?
So on a lot of the special revenue funds, there's a time limit that you have to spend the money. So gas tax is one of them. There are quite a few of them where you have to spend the money at a certain point or they will claw it back.
Right, but I mean, yes, I get that, but like, where's the list of those things,
And how are we tracking?
how do we track it? And how do we provide that information to the policy-making bodies?
Do you
Yeah.
have a grant manager? I mean, that's a simple one. Do you have a grant manager who's saying, here's the money and here's what has to happen and it has to start happening now?
Yeah, so we have a grant analyst. We do not have a grant manager. And it's just one person. And so there's a lot of pieces and facets to it. My concern just off the top is resources to be able to manage that. But that is a serious concern and it has serious material dollar impacts.
But that goes back to the council direction and why council needs to absolutely know this information
Yeah.
is that, I mean, one, on the special revenue funds, you have, almost like $2 million of negative balances that need to be addressed. But so that's something that you need somebody to be on top of.
Yes.
But then on the other side is that you are at risk of losing funds that could be put to work if there isn't resources for that. So it's not a matter, again, of criticism of you or your department. It's something that council needs to understand where the resources need to go and what they need to
Yeah.
start spending money on so that we don't lose money.
Exactly. So I think that's something, I mean, maybe that needs to be agendized on February 7th. And John, I think there's also a realistic, I mean, I'm not trying to load up on these things. And maybe by agendized, it's just a general discussion so that the council can understand what's happening and provide some direction. I don't think, there's a lot of work to be done. So that work doesn't have to be done by February 7th. It just needs to be on an agenda so that it can be discussed and just direction provided.
And John, while we simply offer you counsel and direction, one of the directions I think you clearly hear being offered right now is you need to shoot off some flares to the council. They need to know this, okay? And we're behind you if they start throwing darts. At this point, we're behind you on this.
I can move pretty quick.
I know. We can too, but there's no reason. We need to take this one on. Okay. Thank you.
Absolutely. I know, just I want to say it was this week, Public Works just hired a principal engineer. And I think one of the objectives in that hire for that resource is to really have better management of the capital projects. So I think I don't remember the gentleman's name, but I think he came from the city of Pasadena on there. And so that's to really kind of help facilitate this. There's, RFPs, there's just so many things that go on before you ever get to a shovel-ready project. But we need to have the resources to be able to do that, effectively to get these things done. We're not in the business of, stockpiling money. We're in the business to provide services. And it went, as Commissioner Rossi pointed out, if you're just seeing money stacking up, it's like, okay, so what are you guys doing? Is just kind of the bottom line with that. And so it does need to be addressed.
Thank you.
There's no question.
Commissioner Rossi, one final comment?
This one, which is the grant manager, but also
I
I
knew
think
that.
there was a comment about the contract I think it was a public comment months ago about contract manager
Right.
to help in public works to be able to get through the contracts, make sure where they're supposed to be. So I think it is something wise going into budget season, and kind of our discussion was
Right.
budget season for us starts now,
No.
is to put together the list of resources that are needed
Mhm.
to start putting the money to work properly. And it seems like the priority really is in the public works area and in the grants management, what's happening on that side.
Yes.
Just
Yeah, I very much agree with that.
Thank you. I'd like to take a 5-minute break. And then when we return, let's get right back into let's get into the, the report.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Yes, please do. So John, we're trying to organize ourselves up here to ask questions in the most logical way possible. We're looking at the staff report. You have a copy of that?
So let me say something specifically with the staff report.
Please.
So this was, so in a way, I'm going to kind of apologize for it in the sense that it's very boilerplate, and that was simply because of time constraints. We just got the final report Thursday evening and just the timing of it. So it's very boilerplate. Normally, if you recall, for example, how I did the mid-year staff report last year, where I really kind of break things down, I just simply did not have that kind of time.
Okay.
So just as a caveat,
It's good to hear that, John, because there's some discrepancies we found there, some
okay,
challenges we found, and we wanted to make sure we called them out and
Sure.
asked for, I guess, an amended report to come out.
absolutely, absolutely.
So turn it over to Commissioner Rossi.
So on the staff report, I was going to start off, I brought it up already, page 2 of 5, under discussion analysis. Actually, before I get to discussion analysis, one paragraph above the discussion analysis, you talk about the net position increased by 7 million over the prior year due to larger increases in revenues from charges for services, operating contributions, and grants, property and other taxes, as well as uses of money and property, than increases in expenses in general government, community development, and public works. You restate that in different ways and throughout the the management discussion analysis later, and through, I think, the staff report as well. Later, it'll talk about like governmental activities net position. The reason that it increased was that there was significant capital outlays that were not spent. So I have showing that there's under the special revenues fund, which is part of governmental activities, because this is city's net position overall.
Right.
You have, $7 million of capital outlays that weren't spent, that they were budgeted for but not spent. Another 1.67 on public works that wasn't spent. So I want to make sure that it comes up several different times. Another time it says a decrease in public safety. It's like that public safety went up, so that wasn't it. Yeah. So I want to make sure that what is stated in the staff report and the management discussion analysis are factually accurate and consistent on every page. So I don't want to see it saying something different each time. Discussion, under the discussion analysis, I already brought this up earlier. The paragraphs on the material findings lead person to believe that the 2 material findings fell off and that only one came back up. No, there were material findings that fell off, but there are 2 material findings. And I think those need to be very clearly stated. I prefer to see them either bullet point or numbered. Here are the 2 material findings. And again, that goes to speak to and reference like where it is in the audit, so that the city council members can actually go find it and see what it is if you don't want to include the full language of it. But, again, it speaks to the resources that they need to start directing for you to have and make sure that you are supported properly. As well as to, historical problems and challenges that you guys have been dealing with. And you guys can jump in and as I go through pages. So on page 3 of 5, and this happens a couple times too, but, we talk about, of that amount, 16,915,922, or approximately 42% of the fund balance is the unassigned fund balance of the general fund, right? Then the very next bullet point, it says that the unassigned for the general fund was 19,000,050. And I know what it is. The 19 million is the general fund balance, the 16.9 is less the liabilities for the negative balances in the special revenue funds.
Yep.
So that's not clear in here, and that language needs to be cleared up so that they understand that, the total general fund balance is this, but less the, less the liabilities. And I think it's something good for them to remember that there are liabilities. But otherwise it doesn't seem consistent. The first table, and this happens in the management discussion analysis as well. The first table that's in there, City of South Pasadena net position. I think it should state that it's the consolidated statement of net position, personally, government-wide. Chime in anytime. Like the accountant. And the issue then is the very next page. And it's, again, it's, so it's on page 3 of 5 for the staff report, page 7 of the management discussion analysis. So, and then going to 8. I think it's in the audit, the management discussion analysis in there. Do you guys have this?
So,
copies of the
I'm
staff
sorry, so
report?
what page are we on? I'm sorry.
Stephanie, do we have copies of the staff report for them? Okay. So on page 4 or 5 of the staff report, I can wait. Oh, they're with us? Okay. Perfect. So on page 4 or 5 on the staff report and page 8 of the management discussion, this table should read that it's the consolidated revenue, expenditure, and changes in funds.
You're
Because-
referring to the table itself.
Yes, because it's, you have two things. You have one saying City of South Pasadena change in net position,
Mm-hmm.
City of South Pasadena net position. These are not the same charts, and one's not showing a change in net position versus the other. One is showing your assets and liabilities. The other one is showing, revenues, expenditures.
Right.
Right. So this
Mhm.
is a consolidation, this is a consolidated report of revenues, expenditures, and changes in fund balances.
Yeah,
And that's important because when people go to, cross-reference, when I look at the numbers that are presented in this table, the
Mhm.
table that's on page 8, it does not coincide with the numbers that are presented on page 67 and on page 17. Right, so,
One second, sorry.
no problem.
So, okay, so we're looking at page 8 and we're looking at page 60.
Sorry.
So, okay. If we're talking about pages 8 and pages 7, so these are what I refer to as the government-wide financial statements
I-
as opposed to the fund financial.
I understand that. So
Okay.
what my point is that it needs to be labeled. So
Mhm.
it needs to be labeled. Yeah. Right. So then it makes
Okay.
it hard for people to go
Sure.
and search in the audit
Yeah.
to identify where the numbers are to see if there's consistency.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
No, the biggest one was capital outlay. The biggest issue was the capital outlay was the decrease, but and there's community services as well. But that goes back again to the note before that, the 7.8 million. And there again, you've restated it there. So it's multiple places. It's a misstatement of what happened with the net position.
So I'm sorry, let me.
On page eight.
Eight. So, I'm sorry, so you're referencing on the government activities, the 5,056,000?
I'm telling you right now that everything on, every number pretty much on 8
Mhm.
is wrong. It doesn't foot. So, one way to look at it and look at both, looking at page 17 or 67, your choice.
Mhm.
And you take a look at, public safety. I see on your chart for, page 8 and 4, like I see 17 million for public safety. When I look at what you have on page 17 and 67, I see 20 million,
Mhm.
right? So
So-
the numbers across the board
Mhm.
are not matching. So that goes for all of them. Or maybe capital outlay, like in public works. Maybe capital outlays in public works, because it is strange that they have. No, that's exactly it. I- Right. So it's like up and down. But it was, this chart's wrong. Right, but
So what I'm happy to do is go through a reconciliation on between the funds, between the government-wide activities and the fund financial statements, because there will be differences. They will not be in agreement because there's different accounting. There's different accounting that's going on for the information. So the numbers will always be different on there. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Sure. Sure.
And,
Uh,
and, and John, I mean, explain that to me though. So,
Mhm.
I mean, just looking at total revenues for governmental activities. And you have the 50,928,
Right.
but when you look at, again, page 17, I see 45 million. Why is that different?
Yeah. There and
Where is that 50 number and where could I possibly find it in here?
so, Terry, do you want to speak to the reconciliation between the government-wide and the fund financials?
I don't think Terry was responsible for the management report, but you can go ahead and tell us if this
Well,
makes sense.
No, and you're absolutely right. So the financials are actually 100% my responsibility. So I want to be clear about that. On there, but the numbers will be different between the government-wide and the fund financials, for a whole number of reasons. On one hand, we're going from almost modified accrual basis, which is close to a cash basis, to a full accrual basis on there. And And so, for example, in fund financials, I'll just use the example of, like you're purchasing a vehicle for $20,000 in fund financials. That's an expenditure, and the government wide, it is not an expenditure. So there's a lot of different accounting treatments between the two. And so there will always be differences. They will never be an agreement.
So where is this as an audited statement?
I'm sorry.
So this table, where is this table and the information that's in this table as audited information?
It is.
So,
It
no,
is.
no, but where? Like
Oh,
where in the audit report is this information listed? So, I mean, one of the things that I have trouble with, and I had trouble with the presentation, and I have
Sure.
trouble with this, is we have an audit report,
Mhm.
and then the information is presented completely differently than the way it was presented in the audit. So we're
Mhm.
supposed to be assessing the audit,
Mhm.
and then the numbers are moved around. Here's a new table. This table has not been reviewed by an auditor. This table is not a part of the audit. I can't find it. If there was a page number and I'm missing it, please tell me. But I don't understand why the management report is including financials that weren't included in the audit.
Mhm. So she's referring to, the government wide. So for example, in the, statements of net position,
I'm okay, I'm okay.
the statement of activities, in there, and versus on the fund financials, for example, on page 17. Yeah, and I realize that because there's different accounting method, approaches in there. Yeah, yeah. So these are taken right out of from the government. So, I know we have, we go through the reconciliation process in there. I don't know if that's going to readily jump out though, in this as opposed to, she's referring to statement of net position, the statement of changes in net position versus, like the fund financials. Yeah, no, and I know that, but I'm obviously failing in explaining that.
Eh.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, if you want to take a. So. To Commissioner Rossi's questions on there, I'm going to have kind of Terry kind of briefly touch on this, but they're never going to be in agreement. They will never be in agreement. They're different accounting. It's different accounting. So there are always going to be differences. I can go through an approach, and reconcile why they're going, from one to the other.
Right.
In terms of the changes in the accounting standards that apply to fund financials versus government-wide financials. On there, they do that on an overview at a very high level. But to really get into, here's everything between this and this, I would have to go through a reconciliation process to do that.
So this is where labeling the chart
Yeah.
accurately and appropriately
Mhm.
is important.
Mhm.
Because when I look at this,
They are different. A lot of times when I present something, these are just taken right out of, which is summarized. First two pages.
wait, but so yes, I understand it's taken out of the MD&A, but where is
But the
it?
other
Where
thing
is
is-
it not in the MD&A? Where is it not in the MD&A? The part that you audited?
Staff report?
No, I understand. So
It says statement of net position.
so that is not the table I'm talking about. So I was actually talking about the next one. So you go to page 4.
And it's on page 8 of the audit
page 8 of the audit report is the MD&A. So I'm not, the MD&A you did not audit.
DNA is not audited, but we make sure that it reads the same number this summer.
Okay. And you, the title of it being changes in net position?
Right. Differentiates it from fund statement, our balance sheet, statement, of revenues, and expenditures.
And changes.
Yeah,
So-
I do.
Reconciliation.
Please, go ahead.
I was going to point out that on page 16, there is a reconciliation. So I don't know if this helps to address some of the questions, but I do think it does help to tie out the 41 million that you see on page 17, right? So if you look at page 17, total governmental funds, 41.18.
Right.
And then, so that's the top of your page 16, and it shows all the reconciliations down to the 55 million, which ties out to the changes in net position that you're referring to on page 4, 5, and
Yeah, so I think I wasn't so much concerned about the net position as far as more, you have the revenues and the expenditures in here. And by not having, I think, some sort of labeling and information, you have it not tying with like page 17.
I think the total's tied, but it's just a
It's
matter
never
of the.
going, that's never going to tie to page 17 unless you go to reconciliation.
Right, because one is the revenue expenditures and changes, the other one's the statement of
So
activity.
there's a specific page that does that reconciliation,
That's page 16,
and it's page
Page 16.
60.
16,
18.
18.
18,
So if you turn to page
no, 18.
number 17, and the third number from the bottom on the far right, the 1,501,510.
Mhm.
And you come over to page 18, that's the top number, 1,501,510.
Mhm.
Then you go to the bottom, number, it's 5,056,800. You turn to page 14, you'll see that number, the third one, that first column, 5,056,800. And so what John was saying is capital assets, fund statements get expensed. Then they come back on and go to your balance sheet as an asset. And then the depreciation, that's the opposite. You have like the change in compensated absences. So those get expensed. So the change principal payments on leases are expensed on fund statements. On the government wide, they go against the liabilities. They come off of that. And then change in all the pension related items. That's the deferred inflows, the
Okay.
deferred out. So I mean, I can, if you ever want, to learn more about this reconciliation, I'd be glad.
No, it's less about that as much as, again, if you're going from the information that's in the staff report and the MD&A is wanting to, people be able to tie it back without being auditors and without being finance directors. And so, the reason I didn't say anything about the previous, except that, I think it needs to be a little bit changed on the title, but the previous table was that I could take it back and go, oh, okay, I see exactly where that's coming from in the audit report. When I looked at what was on page 8, I was like, I don't understand.
Well, you could, like some of our clients will put a page above the page,
Mhm.
the tie it. Some don't. But yeah, you could be.
Yeah. Well, the MD&A almost needs to refer back to, because the MD&A is the management presentation, basically a review of what's in the audit.
Summarize.
It's a summary.
Yeah.
So the MD&A is what needs to tie back to the page in the audit, so people can, oh, let me go find that out. And I think that's, one of the criticisms I've had is that it hasn't had the right information and detail for people to go, okay, that's what that information is. Here's where I could find it. So it's that referencing, absolutely.
Reconciliation, like, difference between the two. That's a-
Of course, they're confusing, and that's what makes it even more if it's not stated in here, you know, to say like, this is, go to this page and then look at the reconciliations on
Yeah.
this page. Because then you start looking, you're like, where am I finding this?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you're asking for the management's discussion and analysis to be enhanced with reference points that takes you back to the audited statement, yes?
Yes, and I'm also asking for Cynthia's point that she made on page 8 for the management report. And I think also it's,
What was that, Cynthia? Help remind us. It's
which, well, and I would go a little bit further than that because I don't believe the net position is only community services when I'm looking to when I was looking at the schedule, the special revenue funds, as I said, there was $7 million decrease in capital outlay. And if you don't spend the money that you budgeted, you know, it increases your net position.
so you want that
I want them-
amended to say what, Cynthia?
No, I want them to be specific about why the net position increased and be consistent across the different documents and the different sections, because it's repeated several times in different ways. And each time it
Okay.
says something different. Each time it talks about the net position having increased for a different reason. But I want it to be very clear that part of it is not having put the money to work. Because I want that to be a message that the council understands and hears and is highlighted. It's the red flag. Right? So because otherwise they say, oh, that's awesome, our net position increased. Well, if your net position increased because you didn't,
You're not spending the money.
you're not spending the money that you need to spend, right? That's.
I think just following up on Commissioner Rossi's is that it's important that this document can appropriately communicate to the council in a coherent, non-finance I would say legalese, but non-finances way. Why? So that the council can make decisions and give direction in much better and accurately. Oh, well, why? Oh, well then,
Could be 100.
yeah, right. It's like, why aren't we spending the money? And okay, we really don't have a net increase. I mean, there's sort of two big points to take away from that.
Yeah, I mean, it's a highlighting because what you're trying to do in the MD&A is actually bring in material issues and with analysis. So what you do there is not just say, hey, increase public works. It's like, and also police where didn't make sense at all. Right? That wasn't consistent with
Right, right.
anything. On
Well, that's
police.
just flat.
Huh? That's a flat out
That's just
error.
that flat out there.
Right, but it's,
Probably,
but that's where you say, I mean, it's significant that there was $7 million that was not spent.
Yes.
That was budgeted for. That's a significant, and that's just in capital outlay, not even talking about what public works. That's a significant issue that should be highlighted in the management report. And I think that's when I see the management report, it all needs to be where there's significant things that they need to have top of mind.
People struggle for so many reasons.
Oh, yeah, this is the big point,
Yeah.
but with the number too, because, and that's what, if you, I guess the police is just an error, but.
That position, not volume.
Mhm.
So, you didn't spend prop A, prop C. Very
Mhm.
as property.
Right,
Higher last year.
right.
Yeah.
Which then helps with questions like you had about maintenance and operations as well. I mean, those type of things should be coming out.
Right. It's more like if you were a policy, when you're writing it, if you were a policymaker, what are the key things that that policymaker needs to know?
The MBA is supposed to be
Mhm.
technically the whole reason make it.
So a couple of the changes we've agreed to is we're going to rework the MD&A. We're going to make it clearer. We're going to clean up the errors that we've already identified and ensure that they tick and tie back to the audited report. We will cross-reference any statements made in the management MD&A with the appropriate pages in the audited report.
So usually you'll put one. Well,
Yes, that'd be fine.
fiduciary.
So that if someone wants to do a deep dive, they're welcome to do the deep dive. And then on page 8, we add some recommendations on what that's going to be, what the changes there. So, I did. Are you clear and comfortable with what we're asking you to do on that? Perfect.
All our.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, Sheila, you have a couple more items?
More than a couple.
Okay.
Um,
Do you have as many as we can tolerate?
I think so.
Perfect. Let's go.
Yes, so on page 10,
On the financial report?
on MD&A.
Okay.
So on page 10, you have the unfavorable budget variance of 4.48 million. And it says an unfavorable variance total expenditure. It's actually just a little bit confusing in what's written, but the reality is that, wait, what does it say? It's the unfavorable variance is due to the city paying down the unfunded accrued liability and a favorable variance due to Gatsby. The unfavorable variance, budget variance of 4.48 is the SLRF fund issue, isn't it?
Okay, so hang on a second here. So, let's see.
Or is that?
Okay, so this, this right here is really in relation to, let's say page 67, on there. And so, let's see, general fund reflected of 4,487,000. So that's on the bottom of page 87 on the far right column there.
Correct, but if you go up, the primary reason for that was actually because of the change in classification on the SLRF fund,
Yes, you're absolutely right.
which is
Yeah.
something that, hey,
you're
that's a
absolutely correct
positive
about
for you
that.
guys. I'm trying to help
Yeah.
you out.
No, and that is very much true.
Yeah.
On there. That is the biggest driver of this. But then again, we also had, unfavorable variance on expenditures.
But it's a
And
so it's just a reclassification and that, so that is
it,
not.
correct, it is, yeah. So I'm happy to reward that.
Yeah, and look, again, I think I go back to a lot of the stuff has been boilerplate in a certain way. And this is, and apologize to
Mhm.
the new commissioners. I mean, you guys are already
Mhm.
dealing with me. But it's, time for us to start fixing up these various issues and for future reporting. to make next year easier.
No need to apologize.
Um,
What we're here for.
and similarly, like, you go down to long-term liabilities. And when you go down to the paragraph under the business type activities, it does a nice thing where it totals it up for you. It says it increased by 4.68 million. Right?
Right.
But you don't have that same thing happening in the governmental activities, long-term liabilities.
Mhm.
And so I think that's something to add in. Just total it for people so that
Sure.
so they go consistently. I think that might be it on the management report. There was a thing on the insurance fund section, which I think might have been in the staff report and again in the notes. And so note 10 on page 62 of the ACFR, and I believe it was also stated in the staff report. And this is something that after reviewing over a decade's worth of audits, I'd like to address, which is that this is in both cases, and it's funny because in the staff report, the staff report, the MD&A, wherever it says it the first time, it refers to it as PRISM. On note 10, it refers to it as CSAC,
Sure. Yeah.
right?
Mhm.
But it's exactly the same thing. So the funny thing is in the first reference of it, it's referencing it and then says, go to the back for further information. And then you go to the back for further information. It's the exact same thing. And all it is a policy. And what it's done and the deviation that's occurred for the last decade was dropped off any actual information on what the premiums are related to insurance.
Mhm.
And that is significant. That our costs and expenditures for insurance, and I'm not sure why it's not spoken about,
Mhm.
was 5 million, right? That is what percentage of the budget? That's a significant percentage. And it's something that has been going up every year while there are council members who have stated how much money we saved because they had no understanding or idea for the last 10 years because it has been excluded from the ACFR every time. I mean, a couple years they had conversations in the insurance about OPEB instead, right? I mean, like not even talking about the right insurance, insurance. And so that I know is boilerplate, but it tells me nothing. It tells me nothing. It tells council nothing. So what really needs to come in on these is actually what the premiums are. There was a 28% increase in our premiums between last year and this year. I think that's significant. And that's not including the issue on claims, right? And how much we're paying out on claims and judgment. You have to go through this to figure it out. You have to go through the audit because it's nowhere in the budget. To figure it out, you have to go through the audit on page 19 and try to decipher 19 and 20 and try to decipher what things are. And I had to go and do a public records request to get the premiums for the last 10 years because nobody would give those to me. And I couldn't find it in a single public document. And our insurance has gone up. And one of the things I found out in the premiums was that part of the reason we had a little bit of a drop was we went from having workers' compensation insurance to being self-insured. And that was a significant drop on the premiums that got offset with significant increase in claims and judgments. So we saved on one hand, while drastically increased on another hand. But I look at what I'm seeing here, insurance costs and claims, and I know a portion of this is related to what happened to CGPIA, but it's significant. It is a large percentage of our budget. And it hits every single department.
Yeah.
Right? So when you're looking at cost and claims being $5.2 million and having another set of liabilities that are out there for 2.7 million, and we'll see what the actuary report says for this next year. These are significant costs that have to be addressed in the MD&A, and they have to be addressed in the notes. Sorry, I will get off my soapbox for a moment there.
So just to kind of recap on this, I would just want to make sure that I capture this. So first, let's just talk about the notes, for example, or in this case. So you're looking for within the notes, number one, identify Prism, obviously, as
Mhm.
opposed to the old name,
Correct.
on there. But you would also like to see within here broken out the premiums,
Hmm.
the annual premiums,
Correct.
in there, and the claims paid out.
Correct.
Okay.
So I had it in here, and I'm not sure if my calculations are correct, because I'm just trying to decipher it off of what I have from premiums and from the audit. But
Mhm.
1.28 million in premiums,
Yeah.
which was a 28% increase from last year.
Mhm.
And then we had claims and judgment expense of 2.5 million.
Mhm.
And we also have an accrued liability of 2.7 million.
Right.
You know, and and I'm guessing the claims and judgments because I backed out the 1.489 from
Sure.
all of
Right.
that. But yeah, but I think that's an important one to have. So because look, I looked at a lot of other state or city budgets,
Mhm.
and they're all talking in their audits about the fact in their budget reports that the cost of insurance in California is going up.
Yeah.
And so it is a significant risk. So I feel like it's a material and it needs to be captured.
Okay. So with respect to note 10, but you were also asking about including that language in the MD&A as well.
It was somewhere else. It was either in the MD&A or the. I know I saw it. I'm not great. It could be.
And again, I would just add that when we're doing the MD&A, it should include the data and the analysis of like, what would a policymaker want to know? And I think that's to Commissioner Rossi's point is claims and insurance premiums are material. And I think a policymaker might want to say, 28% interest increase in our premiums. Is that what's happening everywhere? Do we need to look at other insurance possibilities? You know, it's just those kinds of things that make people think about what should we do here?
Okay.
I'm sure I can find more, but I'll take a break.
We're asking John to correct language as well.
I think that's it for me on the MD&A. What about? Yes.
Yeah.
It's a big document. But I think I understand the rest of it. And I do want to say, you know, as I said before, I think a lot of this is additional work to fix up historical, even the MD&A and the staff report, to change the style and structure of the language and how things are reported. So, and I don't think I commended you guys, but I want to commend you, John, specifically for getting this audit done to us in time. You know, and I actually expected it in February and you brought it to us in January. So I hope, you know, it's noted that like all of this stuff is to improve it and it's not a rejection of anything that you're doing. But you're the first person to have delivered an audit to us in how many years? By January, 5 at least, 6? Yeah. So, and look, and you see like one of the material weaknesses is a result of what happened in 2020, right?
Yeah.
And it's the poor reporting, the late audits and all of that stuff. So the fact that you delivered it to us so early and now we've had this opportunity to like pick it apart and
Yep.
make it better.
Yep.
Is commendable.
Well, thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Recommendations, finance commission receive, file, and make comprehensive finance.
Mr. Chair, we do have one public comment for this item. Mr. Betta?
Janet, this is what you need to know. The areas that have been brought up in content and conversation beginning last year that have still not been discussed. First thing, there are 5. This audit confirms a deficit year of $1 million. The adopted budget is $2.4 million deficit. That is the definition of a structural deficit, ladies and gentlemen. You've got more than 1 year. That's going to require an awful lot of conversation from the city council. And if the council wants to deficit spend, so be it. So say it publicly. Number 2, the reserves that correlate to deficits should be clearly explained. There are more than 5 categories that have to be brought together for a full picture where the reserves are. Number 3, special revenue. There are 13 deficit balances in special revenue. The general fund is the last stop, the final buck. There has to be conversation about whether the general fund will be responsible in the future for special revenue problems, in particular grant problems. With the same candor that Mr. Downs used about clawbacks, you have to have a conversation about grants that have failed for reimbursement and need to be returned. Number 4, all conversations about the insurance fund, including cash balance, and especially now the actuarial liabilities that are going to be reflected on the statements. John Primus has said he doesn't want the full liabilities reflected in your conversations. I think we need to go back and talk about that. And CIP, you touched on this. A fraction is being spent of the budget. This staff needs to stop talking about CIP in terms of budget, but in terms of its ability to execute the California Public Contracts Code in particular. There have been 2 years of this administration without building up this public works department in perhaps the most important element that residents see in this community. What's happening with capital? I don't want to drive Linden. Neither do you, okay? It's time for the responses. There are several failures of policy in those 5 areas I've talked to you about. The council needs to talk about their adherence to their own policies. Your city manager needs to describe those things to you. And unless I'm sorely mistaken,
30 seconds.
thank you. Your city manager needs to come really straight with you about something in your mid-year policies. The council's own policies say, pursuant to the content of the mid-year report, the council shall provide specific and general direction to staff for short and long-term budgetary planning. There has been a generation of city managers that have developed their own budget, thrown it at a council, and then dared you to do what you want with it. If you start with the instruction this year of bringing in a balanced budget, you will not have a fight with Armanate Chaparian.
That's time.
Thank you.
Thank you, Josh. Now, item number 5. It is a recommendation. It is that the Finance Commission receive and file the annual comprehensive financial report. Does anybody want to so move?
I can't
You
move,
cannot.
but my question is, and you've done a great job of identifying different things. And John, thank you for your willingness. And I know you've been out with dealing with some things. But all the various topics or issues that and changes that were going to be made to the MD&A, I mean, is that going to be, that won't be brought back here, I assume? Or is it going to go directly to council? I'm just kind of curious as to process.
John, speaking to the mic, please.
So that's a good question. I think we're definitely going to incorporate all these changes within the document. It's a question of because I just kind of hate to delay it. But that's not my only concern with this, especially as it pertains to, I have such incredible timeline, short timelines going from here and jumping into the mid-year. With limited resources, you know,
Right.
so I'm just kind of a little bit.
Yeah, be realistic here. I mean,
Uh,
don't do it
So,
something that you can't do.
You know, again, I'm not opposed to making these changes, you know, I agree with the comments and, you know, period. I'm just, you know, worried about, you know, timing, with this.
What
So
do you need?
Well,
I'm not okay with that.
Not even.
So I mean, I would like to see the changes being made because the MD&A is a part of the audit package
right,
as well as the staff report. I don't want to see this because of time constraints go up. All of the numbers, I'm not questioning the numbers that are in the audit and have been audited.
Yeah.
So those can be used to go ahead and be working on the mid-year. But
Right.
I'm not okay with the reporting. And I think at some point we have to start saying no to things to start making the changes.
right,
So it's just to me a matter of, and I'm happy to work with you. I don't know
Right.
how that works, but whatever it does to just change the reporting to be more helpful for council policy, but it
Right.
should probably come back to the commission. When are we-
So, you know,
coming
it,
soon?
We're not meeting till the 21st. That's the challenge.
so I don't know if this works in the finance, but I know when I was on planning commission, sometimes we would approve a project subject to what we would call a chair review. And the chair could sort of designate somebody, and I don't know if you do it on Public Works, Evelyn. So that you can kind of designate somebody to review the report and approve sort of on behalf of the commission, or just make sure it's done correctly. And
Yeah.
you give that person sort of the discretion.
So the proposal I hear you make is that we approve the budget, the audited financial statement, contingent upon the changes being made to the management analysis and discussion document
In the staff report.
and the staff
Yes,
report.
the staff report.
And thank you very much. And okay.
Subject, so you would say subject, and you would like, you know, you would like to appoint Sheila Rossi as somebody to work with John to make the changes and review before they go to council.
That's a possibility. Before we move forward, though, the mayor has an additional public comment.
The ACFR and is not going to back to the Finance Commission. So the changes are to be subject to, it has to be followed because last year, council adopted the budget for 23-24 subject to the 5-year projection, but that never happened. So I told Armine, before you talk to me about 2024, 2025 budget, I want to see that 5-year projection. It has to come to council. And we have not even met the NHA advisors. I asked her, would you, is the 5-year projection will be consisting of the report from Bill Stadler, the first person, and then followed by the NHA advisors, but I received no response. So I would opine with the Finance Commission to appoint someone. We always do this with Cultural Heritage Commission, subject to changes. We usually appoint a commissioner to work with staff, and these revisions, especially in the maintenance and operations and capital outlay, they're so significant that make some footnotes to explain to us council, like explaining to an 8th grader, because we need to give informed decisions, and it's really really important that we don't adopt a budget with a deficit, just like last year. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Mayor. Madam Mayor, pardon me. So how do we frame this resolution that we're voting on?
I have a recommendation, if you would like
Please.
to hear it.
Yes.
A motion to receive and file with the amendment to appoint a commissioner to work with the finance director on the edits that are needed before presented to city council.
Does that cover it? Your mind, Janet?
Discussed by the commission, yeah.
Cynthia? Sheila?
Just, I didn't want to assume who's being appointed, so if you could name somebody.
I would like, I hate to do this, but I'd like to ask two of our commissioners
Okay.
to serve in this spot. Cynthia, you and Sheila. Okay. Neither do we. Yeah, you gotta think. Are you comfortable with doing that? Perfect. Okay, so it'd be Commissioner, it'd be Sheila and Cynthia. Okay,
Sounds great.
Perfect. So read it to us one more time, please.
Motion to receive and file the document with the amendment to appoint Sheila Rossi and Cynthia Quaid to work with the finance director on the edits that are needed before the document is presented to council.
Before.
Mhm.
Underline that. Thank you. I make a motion that we accept this as stated.
Second.
We got a second, okay?
Roll call.
Roll call, please.
Chair Giuliani,
Yes.
Vice Chair Rossi,
Yes.
Commissioner Quaid,
Yes.
Commissioner Hernandez,
Yes.
Commissioner Ho.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Healthy discussion. Thank you to all who are involved. Really appreciate it. City Council Liaison, Janet, communication.
Just thank you for the great discussion as always. This is such a really fantastic commission. So thank you. And to John and your staff, thank you for all your hard work. I know you've really put a lot into this and we're just evolving and getting better every month. So thank you.
That's next. Staff.
There really isn't any comments at this point.
I have to echo Janet's recommendation and recognition of you and the team, particularly given the fact that you've lost a key member of your team recently. So what I was asking when I asked, what do you need? What do you need from the city council in order to get your staff back to where you need it to be?
So a lot of it, unfortunately, is really time. It's time to develop the staff. It's it doesn't work to just have the approach to quote bring in bodies. It really doesn't work that way. It's really get staff getting up to speed, rebuilding the institutional knowledge, the processes. In addition to that is continuing refinements of current processes within the finance department to streamline things, to start, eliminating or reducing bottlenecks and things of that nature. But unfortunately, there is no other way of doing it than just with time. It's just one of the things, we can bring in someone and they don't know the city, they don't know its finances, they don't know its accounting systems. It's just not at least in my opinion, a good approach on there. It's just the nature of the work. So we have we have three, we have two contract staff people. One of them is filling the role of Sue Lee. He's been here since I think beginning of November. The other person has been with the city for some time and they're a retiree and they work part-time. They just left for Mexico, so they'll be working remotely. They go down there for so many months. I guess they have family members down there. So we have them, but it's really just crucial that we just continue to develop our staff in-house and just make the team stronger and more efficient more than anything else, on there. That's all I can really say.
Yeah, we can't give you time, but we can give you.
Yeah.
Okay, just know that, John.
Yeah, no, understood. It's just the dynamic that we're dealing with.
Commissioner Hernandez, welcome to the party.
Thank you.
Okay, any closing comments?
Not at this time.
Commissioner Ho,
No comments for me.
my goodness. They're afraid of us. Commissioner Quaid. Commissioner. Yeah. And thank you for being willing to work with John. Appreciate it. And Commissioner Rossi?
Welcome to the two new commissioners. Hope we haven't frightened you off. And John, I appreciate you, and I might come off tough, but I also don't expect perfection and understand this is a work in progress. So every comment that I made, it's all about improving. So I really, really appreciate you and your staff. Thank you.
For us, it's just constant refinement. It's really what it is at the end of the day. So,
It's been restructuring, which is much more than constant refinement. It's been a wholesale restructuring, and I think you need to give yourself credit for that, because refinement means things were working smoothly, you're just fixing things. You had to go through and like do damage assessment and, excavate and figure things out. So it's more than that. And even, I didn't bring up the point, but there's a lot of reconciliations, like $7 million. I'd like to make it a goal at some point to reduce that, but I understand that you're still fixing things.
yes, yeah,
Thank you.
absolutely. Thank you.
And congratulations on your first presentation. We enjoyed it. Okay. Okay. And John, I echo what everyone is saying. We appreciate you. And you have a 1-year anniversary coming up shortly, right?
It seems like just a month ago.
I think we need to buy some champagne. Okay. Oh, yes. Okay. With that, it is 9:54 and I declare this meeting adjourned.